Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be this one, or the.
Is this one? You're gonna get thrown out, but you're gonna get bricked up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
use leadership capacity, governance, self-governing capacity, strengthen foundations, diplomacy of the U.S. Must restore capacity, vision, and ability of leadership, scenario one's for global dominance, global signaling is paramount. Quickly 25% China, innovated by the impulse to erase borders and defeat Ukraine to 100 points or 40 lines. Britain declared an MA to rebuild Russia war in crossing Ukraine, Belarus, Baltic Sea, claimed Taiwan, South China Sea, to Coral Islands, floated threats to use territories, Ukraine experience, also Taiwan, and power Taiwan could expand. Ability to power, project power, deploy assets, that third forces, Russian news, or achieve from result together, and capability to use alliances, make way for further countries such as Japan or Philippines, although Russia's bogged down with control over Ukraine population resource, endowments take control of coming together, build to rebuild. Remember, private provides boards for renewed aggression, replace NATO in reactive vulnerable positions that have conflict persistent great powers, really stop spending unless they are blocked. Germany and Japan have to be crossed to end their imperial collapse of the Union, also to extend its region, orbiting Turkey, suppress levelization, deploying missiles in Cuba, only sustained Western resistance kept in check, prolonged stochastic failure, ensures adversarial aggression, culminating in great power war, Slater in 25. Trump is a weak strongman, every other state, finished your arsenals, destroys, others created enemies, welcome destruction, Trump is department that, overseeing money, weapons, and intel uses, tools, the world of course, cannot bear any problem with that. Trump cannot make China Russia around news, bidding sanctions matter only their policy for their policy, there must be institutions coming to people. First policy was to fire those coming to people to implement policy, the money, the people who knew anything about Russia are gone for the ranks, in the place conflicting efforts to make concessions to Russia didn't work, positions over Putin, assumed that he could get more escalated, Trump said treated wolves, clothing the rules, himself, therefore Trump cannot currently fed without competence, self-service, making sanctions work to your need, people in the job instruction, creates incentive structure for enemies, comes on their side, putting North ceasefire, and will use any ceasefire to prepare for the next invasion, just fully confident the U.S. weakened about Trump, we're unable to respond. Great power wars, existential, clear in 25. 10% of the war killed in an hour of competition. Resources among great theory of powers which are 10 times more powerful than the A-bomb war. Be the hard but in human history, but include extinction, possible to famine, nuclear winter, or reversing violence, pandemic, reach extinction. Scenario 2 is alliances, great power peace is on the brink. Institutional cracks, ensure nuclear confrontation. Fever 25. The U.S. long relied on global power and influence for peace. Trump's long down resort to some point institutions to constitute power, manage global border, crack, enforcing global migration. Let's keep on replacing leadership. All powers are keen to work together with the U.S. They're not keeping without the U.S. holding its burden without change. Trump's hypothetical American power can usher a new political order. Great powers and level hostile will hold sway advances to wide spheres, but rub against another faction. GPW would intensify. Strong alliances cap by nuclear in the Pacific and deter Taiwan invasion. With 25 alliances can enable preventing catastrophic GPW in the Pacific, which derail Trump and alliances with multiple returns of allies such as Japan and Philippines offer access to Taiwan with the U.S. plans to deploy artillery assets, which on the table by restricting not as FOA to like years of potential benefits for the U.S. subtracted war. China's crucial in design an option to China option to turn conflict into regional conflict. Something able to use to disperse forces which contribute to stability. Quad plays a key role for allies to prevail. War of attrition. The Indo-Pacific is a tinderbox prime for nuclear annihilation. Charlie 26. Indo-Pacific entering ages air military mod grazing expansion receiving the balance of power advantage. Undertaking expansion of nuclear arsenal investing inside the SBM subset nuclear capable systems. Russia's nuclear threats in Europe demonstrating nuclear coercion is central. Taiwan goes nuclear hitters in 26. Conflict over Taiwan puts pressure for nuclear carbon. America's Afghanistan represent attempted to utilize Chinese their capabilities for nuclear use, their conflict resulted in defeat, reinforced nuclear chain, Chinese fight on nuclear employment, undisputed nuclear employment, even partial collapse of the world order, ends free trade and kills the NPT, government 26 American alliances after reaching order becomes inward looking states up down, autonomy, democracy, decline, global divided, and non-political order collapses, states stick their own deterrent, elder dominant, but monopolist, high tariffs, military problems confronted, now see the result far poor. Trade buffers, great power war, Alabama 22, country have to deal with engaging trade war, cross war trade, multi-world to their own partners, theories of temptation, taking centers conflict of peace in Europe, Middle East, Asia, threatened by decoupling and debating American government activity for war, the cost of foregone trade, huge U.S. trying to decouple and cost of war, lower proliferation and entomb the globe, brands in 25 countries, threatened by Japan, flip court to one way they preempt never get them without a dozen shakes, small arsenals are affordable, incentivized for ball stores, good camp packing, flight times short, they have to use considerable style for countries, we're using it to better open adversary of dominant style, win, Indonesia or Vietnam want nuclear fall, every crisis take on nuclear dynamic of global locations, if the U.S. was not involved, it still need to use support Paris and Washington behind it on those arsenal matches, without go the that support. That's the plan. 1964 government should check the collective bargaining rights for the vast majority of federal civilian employees. Lastly, solvency. 3 standards ensure collective bargaining is preferable to the quo or any counter plan. First, equilibrium. Bargaining is the sweet spot. Ensures managerial flexibility while safeguarding employment emission. Multiple 3 rights reserved to management include mission as remove emergencies. However, we bargaining numbers, skill set, method, and means to provide remedy. If employers fail to comply, Congress safeguard implement. Unlimited CPR. Second, collective voice. Only certain comprehensive rights unlock it. Direct and 10. Comprehensive bargaining protect employees' rights. Not counting the state's interest in bargaining. Not an end, but means by achieving peaceful relations with valuable contribution. There's no part. Voting process incentivizes innovation. That's from place creation with authority and consistency in the absence of parties and outcome procedures, with rights, and doubt that the scope of uncertainty, no to determine public employees, private voice, communicate viewpoints, beneficial, enhancing dignity, satisfaction, productivity, responsibility, rights, liberate employees, neither under power of the executive to dictate their employment, participation, boost motivation, perform well at work. Only CBRs violate the work civil service, work and 10. Public collective marketing is the best interest of the state, unilateral labor law, reduces discretionary source, it allows management to retain discretion marketing and incentivize innovation while the order clauses give managers the right to maintain efficiency of the operations, so it could be vital innovation for government. Worker voice is the linchpin of government capacity, for grade 16. Employees are strongly motivated to define purpose for union as a trick motivation. Unions play an important job satisfaction approach to the factors that draw individuals into service secretary. The right to unionize with it was important to recruit educated people without collective identity. They perceive employment solely as a way to earn a living, weakening the institution workers pursue careers in hub theater. In spite of lower wages, unions strongly later desire to accomplish more. Proven by a meta-analysis of 1,000 studies on public theater unionizations later in 12. improve efficiency, 1,000 studies provide utilization and lower unemployment workers, better train and unions retain workers, innovation, negotiations, broad efficiency, broad works and skill while limiting rules less appropriate. Even mundane bargaining subjects are key to worker morale. 225. Workers feel unions don't say until work family leave. That makes a difference in quality of life. Flexibility is worked away the government is losing command of psychologists, engineers, because we're losing institutional knowledge. The process of bargaining itself is key to public service motivation. Prefer the consensus of the best organizational psychologists. Davis and 12 unions are integral in increasing autonomy. Unions increase satisfaction. Name pro. Prefer values alter purpose of work. Unions communicate and increase pace of unions associated with willingness to sacrifice responsibility, advance collective good wishes. Also, PSA bargaining is going to contribute to reforming AGs, provide benefits to the employees as well as organizational outcomes because they participate in role creation. CBRs are key to info sharing, worker morale, and agency productivity. Coupler 24 benefits of bargaining stand beyond the tangible co-bargaining employees' voice, removes employees and improve conditions, versus infrastructure and produce more efficient work units and bring concerns of management, product clarification, membership. Second, working effective, work together, reducing performance, real employee engagement is more productive, removing increased likelihood of disputes, will linger. 3 resources. Unions are self, woolly bureaucrats are not. 124 units accumulate resources and expertise, long sophisticated and final financial defenses are used more effective litigating and achieve higher remains of vulnerability to litigate. For that, for the way, they also provide financial and logistical support. Resources underpin the quality rights. 125 civil servants pool resources organized around a range of issues, cultivate bar opportunities to litigate a range of issues, formal rights, have much more value invested in more organized resource groups, which means vindicate. You provide such rights. Circumvention is empirically denied in 124. Data indicates deliver a meaningful percentage cost added to the much higher than the MTB when it achieves 100% data. Stability through Trump, no communication of strong anti-union bias. The VA thumps all dissats. Weister 313. Treasury and stated bargaining agreements cover 330,000 employees canceled, and Trump's EO stripping workforce to collectively bargain. I have 25 seconds. Okay.
You good for project?
Yes.
Okay. Who does the plan?
The plan says USFG. Normal means it's probably Congress.
Probably Congress. Okay. The plan text says the vast majority of federal civilian employees. Who do you think that includes and excludes?
It includes the vast majority of federal employees.
Okay. Like who? Like which agencies do you restore that? Like
The vast majority.
implies that there is a set of workers that do not get CVR
A
strikes.
slim minority, correct.
A slim minority. Okay. Which slim minority?
Like we're telling you, the plan applies to
You
the
said
vast
you've
majority
read an
of federal
advantage about the credibility of the rebuilding of the entire U.S. civil service, and you like don't know who is
No,
given
I do
rights
know.
or not in the plan.
It's a vast majority. If I handed you a box of pizza and I was eat a vast majority of the slices, that's sufficient. Like you know which slices.
I mean, like,
how many slices to eat.
That would assume you didn't read an advantage that was like, I'm hungry for an entire box of pizza.
We
But
solve the
whatever.
vast majority of our advantages by
so
getting workers a vast majority. of
Whatever.
rights.
I want to talk about. Do you think you have an internal link that is not about hiring and firing?
Yeah, productivity, the safety of workers, what they perceive. So even if they don't get
Well,
fired,
and
they
so
think
like,
they can get
what is
fired.
the impact of that?
Wait, even if
I mean, it's all linear. The more productive workers are, the more effective they are at carrying out bureaucratic functions.
Also,
which are key to both internal
like,
and
which
external
Also,
advantages.
also, like insofar as the hiring and firing, it's also about bureaucratic retention and their ability to recruit new talent. Also, so
Okay,
it's
but like,
more broadly about
new
the
talent to
talent.
do what? Like, what bureaucratic functions are they
Like
doing?
all of them, everything the agencies are doing. Like they need to be doing their job. What Congress authorized them to do, when they pass legislation, those agencies then enforce those things. They're not doing that now because
Okay. Which
they're being
bargaining-
fired. They're scared of being fired.
Which bargaining rights does the plan strengthen?
Collective bargaining rules.
Okay. Come on.
The ones
What
that
do
they
you ask about?
the rights that they had pre-exile.
Which were what?
Collective
The
bargaining
ability,
rights.
the
Like, what do you-
Tommaso evidence says they have the ability to bargain over the number of employees, the skill set, the method and means by which employees perform their jobs and are fired.
What does it mean to
and
bargain
kinds
over
of-
skill set?
Huh?
How do you bargain over skill sets?
Like
No.
what type of skill?
Like, do we need
workers are
engineers?
preferred
Do we
in
need toxicologists? Like, what kinds of workers we're hiring?
Okay. And,
And
so
also,
the
like, the
plan just
skills
restores
of
the previous CVRs that they had.
Likely, that's the most likely way. It
The
could be
plan
done.
does not grant any bargaining rights that were not prior in the past.
It's not great.
Prior to executive order.
Okay.
There's no new things that they can bargain.
Okay. The prolif impact, who proliferates?
Likely our allies first. Our evidence says countries in East Asia like Japan, South Korea, Philippines, that would set off regional cascades. Adversaries would try to preempt them, also develop their own nuclear capabilities, spill over into Europe.
Okay.
That's
The great power conflict scenario, the internal link card, the Snyder card, is just like creates adversarial incentive. Or wait, no, it's which card? I think one of your cards is like creates adversarial incentives, and then the only example it gives of an adversarial incentive is like Russia invading another NATO country. Like, do you think you've read an external impact based on any other great power?
yeah. Or it says China is invoking like crises in the Pacific. They're going to invade Taiwan.
6, bureaucracy signaling.
good? Okay.
Okay, I'm good.
Zach?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sweet. The American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations on the condition an escalating series of strike and disruptions of logistical activities on the United States federal government strengthening collective bargaining rights for the vast majority of federal civilian employees. Militant union activity is effective at pressuring federal adoption and solves the case to revitalizes the militant union that's taken. In terms of AFF, state labor structure, taking bargaining rights, adjust to action, usually that silence AFF is called. Unions and largest component of the working class need for the removal of terms of these political structures supporting union rights laws. The union self-made preventing lightning them critical support discussions of workplace, winning over some discussion with the union takes seven militant five sparking all those militant unions for the head molly taxes the counterparts of race together. And the pursuing and pressuring action political strikes that governments illegal as union is risky unions as maybe season arresting opposition with the resistance we must release which course to preserve unions more militant unions by the leadership of the rest of the movement provide examples others follow. Union militancy rebuilds labor power to tackle corporate threats including climate change and mass surveillance. That's what goes us. The internet, the future requirement by the movement coalition type of societal issues for surveillance, promoting expansion, housing, climate change, realignment, centers, agency, working class, right opportunities, transfer, governance, workers, change, information, property, common concerns, and the common good, energy, workers, fighting future, work, compromise, work, ecologically unsustainable, working class, shape, economy, around sustainability, active, artificially, demand, provide inputs for reformation of institutions, labor, incorporated through CBRs, capacity for radical break with season matters, working class, predators, recovery, social, capitalist, power, military, capacities, need, union, accepting capital, control, state, right, market, absolute, military leadership, the struggle, option, future, power, straight, related, military, bargaining, national, austerity, movements, opportunity for establishment, policies, for workers, and supply chain, government, and workers, facilities, alliances, structural, rules, and environments, commission, details, development, never charge for green international goods. Surveillance state is existential. It shuts down dissent to Barack. And then 22 surveillance reactions for retaliation is existential. Only events that are composed of civilization destruction made perpetrated by states, delegates, as district, and states, order, people, Washington, development by the state, famine, surveillance, destroyed, activity, voting, groups, justified, hardship, life, economic condition, maintains stability, establish country, democracy, discretion, dissent, right. And then there's represent country, terrorist, surveillance, induces investment, military tech search, that block, tech enhancement, control, deterrent, by women's nukes, diagonal, Georgia. Junior, next office T, substantial is 2%, worth of raising 60, substantial means 1/4 the yes, Constitution, substantial violation, the plan is only 1.3, that's even. And then 25% of the workforce is less than 2% of the total civilian and before 107.7 million. Voter for limits and ground anything smaller than 2% of the workforce could be a single person and skirts generic sex off. Is that House Freedom Caucus has said the United States federal government should not require a year-round sale of E15. E15 tops the House docket, it'll pass with GOP a ski, that's become. In 26 House on the record about leaders are going to vote next month, it's on no fatal, but illustrate the constitutional changes and compromise now ready in the death was a product of countless hours of conversation, comes out of all of it was completely happy, was again, this is what it takes to get things done. Running Trump announced Congress passing 15, he was signed. Reversing Fed worker cuts ends the cover that fiscally conservative HFC members need to vote on bills light in 25 agreement to continue federal funding is unable prompted outrage in that House the House was saying that BL HFC argument also wait legislation last running postponed later deferred in the legislative debate that lawmakers wanted the judges the reason for the vote judge cut the federal workforce composition use start about on the road changes to Hawks that test power so the majority House printed their congressional supporting budget all those going to be advanced and has the must efforts. House GOP cohesion is key to the E15 bill. Hagstrom in 2016 Congress on Congress ability to allow year-round E15 and groups in a communication dealing with the House of Representatives trying to finish the bill that satisfied with ethanol refined to E15. Now we can't wait the ethanol is relying on Johnson and members in the House. E15 is key to ag profit and investment. That's St. James. In 26 ethanol remains a good demand driver ethanol is what you have bushels wanting real investments from profit year-round E15 extra remains barriers to sustain ag markets and make it easy to run workers ability drives ag innovation. That drives ag innovation that overcomes all causes and creates sustainability. CO2. In 25 farmers must increase income and innovate for as much difference as opportunity to transform from down prices of the reduced environment by and use leaders like more sustainable profitable along the supply chains and media challenges worry about dynamics and control unlock carbon fuel innovation tremendous synergy innovation sustainability ag can do early impact tariffs of there's future of ag sustainability easy causes sustainability operations sustainable ag innovation checks great power food wars and environmental collapse Sikorsky. In 24 food security nation security ag contribute the airstrike conflict to stabilize region naval tested union just while taking Russian around opportunities ban and green union shining competition aggressive reference security fresh geopolitical national direct security and location world must prepare world face defeating world all the voting conflicts addressing our missions safeguarding use of field to resolve threats against sustainability efforts geopolitics outside view influence leadership and emerging tech ag innovation sustainability agreed magic food security challenge text off not specifying an agent in the plain text is voting issue it's key to competition links to core mechanisms to success. In education next off is midterms the Dems are running the House now Phillips 3-2 it's a charge Fed worker cuts or a gift to Dems the plan flips it that's Schneider. In 25 firefighter workers, potent workers for the midterm service department communication, the Water Guard for workers. Again, just talk about how Trump party coming campaign message, Judge Thomas, the back of his judge feature in the election debate, banger shift, gives Dems who struggle to form a media message, organic aggressive statement, fighting voters and battlegrounds, see resource connected voters, the elements, never started, no juice before freeze the flashpoint. A Democratic win prevents nuke testing, park in 25 marches, raise the midterms, get Dems out, disrupt testing purposes, go to the NEG, block funding, otherwise extinction Smith. In 25 nuke testing has been effective in the national strain testing, destabilizing weakness, having storm cycles against use more terrorists. Critical next off is a counterplan. The United States federal government should condition collective bargaining on federal civilian employees paying 4.4% of their salary towards research and development and talent retention and AI safety. Conditioning collective bargaining. Protections on salary reduction solved Smith. In 25 raise contribution for existing federal employee to a year reform spending 30.7 billion revenue increase option for hires to like that will employ lower contribution proposal for federal employees option to elect a service will in exchange for higher lower contribution rate federal employees option for service protection based salary contribution retained and creating financial benefit for social security measures saving exceed 50 billion for provides no responsibility. Expanding funding for AI safety work through R&D and fellowships ensures safe US AI becomes the global gold standard crapper unit. And then 25 opportunities by the massive for cutting efficiency improving up services to replace second use company that reliable secure require
not keep pace with AI development, marketing on research community, commercial language, US Cup, R&D, lab, world day, computer, AI, potential accelerating security, research programs, for million, federal government, lead, targeted funding, domestic innovation, AI, and ensuring America's AI and global standard, grants required no state statute under assisting authorities. US AI leadership prevents extinction, McCaskill. In 25 ways, we've been dealing intelligence and ensure the country that gives reason for AI development, so reviews, invest heavily in equities and advantages, so AI time without risking leaders and quantities, significant lead actions, so not knowledge, exploit, keeping as a blue promising leader, about saving, until we make AI situation better, reducing subsidy, over development, better figure, desirable police from ghost structures, get uptake of them, humanity, control AI, for decision value, limit, improve, safety, fails, could produce with values, or regular energy sources, or forcing the future, preventing extinction, pursuing new work, types, new technical trends, space, what is our hard to take over miscellaneous AI, helpful, ensuring healthy AI deployment, use widely valuable work done immediately scale, make better choices from standing, use amount of AI, reach most more league up the frontier, AI development, bureaucracy advantage, Trump won't listen to experts even if he can't fire him, Shapiro, in 20, Trump taking part of these headwinds, ignore rights, all sorts of economy, self-trade scientists, pandemic, intel, foreign pressure for his guts, layers of protection exist now, got them in 25 complying, resigning, only opposite, just say no duty, federal law, support protection, foreign rights, big constitutional laws, rules, regulations, decided to do something about the pronounced such as secure rules and rights or appropriation, and Congress personality refused to obey rights, and today Congress protect without for right during first Trump spending protection, to close refusal to obey orders of our violate rules, rights, something new terms, no, just over refuse to hire, it's no offense, fighter employees, remedies, appeal, SEM, speed protection, as well as just 3 M to be resisting, there's a voice, required, no impact to agency laws, loft house, and then 24, modern never safe, looks efficient, epistemic use, and fails to generate, utilize expert knowledge, effectively, agency, exact features, on the reliability, back to your conceals, to failures, long, extra software, advice, to reasonable, modern never safe, plus among the last for knowledge, reduce the ability to adjust those problems, and effectively, it solves nothing, any exemption triggers everyone else to quit, right now, in 23, loyalty testing, and reporting the civil service, addressing the undermined faith, amending, resign, and massive persons, would never sign up, no wicked problems, impact buffers, and intervening actors solve, James, and the 24, public question, knowing about history, human psychic, social, and even pressing the challenges of laid out, government solutions, that customer former, rating, and importance of information, solving, and deliver proof, should be optimistic, but more important, more secure than we think, federal unions collapse, agency flexibility turns case, Higgins, in 23, public industry to build market force agents are not going out after the business, also building advantage, self-producing new unions, self-election, time refuse to do enemy, union messages, utility from crisis, more working policy to do that, people that are going to allows you to go to services, infrastructure, public unions, work, academic, accountability, supervisors, law, civility, make justice, like push reform, public relations, unions, public now, and connection, signaling advantage. The listener says CPRs are necessary but not sufficient. It says it requires additional pay, apprenticeship training, reversing impoundment, and civic engagement, which is the recutting. Impact card has no scenario for war. The closest it gets is Putin will have incentive to start another invasion, but no whether that starts a war or if it did, the existential. Russia is cooked, no escalation star. In 26, Russia assesses war against Ukraine, Russia hold on that the Ukrainian province, Russia crystallizes Ukraine culture, Russia using NATO, ever NATO advances Russia, no money to any military, gets immobilized by social risk, with the Iranian government exposed, freedom, country, Russia's member, capitals, and sexual wars, so all the front scenes, maintain basic services, heating, water, maintenance, still forces, business, have no funds, Russia's lost advantage, like funds, oriented energy industry, Moscow, deputy short, countries, Denmark, honey, lots of Russia, population, the second session. Let the reforms, alliances are resilient despite Trump shaking. In 21, America predicted for serving alliances, alliances, right for vulnerability, new US alliances for hunting wages, soft across time, use fund reputation, pollution, relations, weather, threats, and and funds located capable of preserving NATO and brilliant at navigating storms and alliances, and sustains health because of both parties' interests band together. The final continue cooperating, especially NATO is not occurring not because grand strategies happening because of values or inspiration, people and without Trump's not was a reputation of commitments, alliances, or robust ideology of American policy makes it attractive to other countries and draws countries to volunteer ally enemies risk of being pulled into America's policies. No China war or Indo-Pacific aggression. Hail. In 26, U.S. intelligence and expectation building invasion, China's legion, now invasion, coordination, they are excited for communication, Beijing consider the variety of factors including PLA, revenue sectors, Taiwan, and whether U.S. will intervene, too many versus Chinese leaders, China leadership, probably prefers unification without force, economic cost, Chinese economies, future, that fund, time, reverse without force, send out your corruption, version, China build the option like leadership, who ranking officials. Trade is thumped by the last year and a half, and Trump messing with tariffs and export control doesn't deter war. Framework, interesting commercial trade is an option under commercial peace theory, but clearly the high levels of invention, not for those high in the health policy, and other countries that are fighting maintain commercial ties, state trades, even when at work that at war, no pro-left, Alaska, 25 pushing against formers of extra struggle, big world, goes false allies, a member of the MET was about mission, monitoring, face domestic opposition, institutional games, supposedly white attack barriers, maybe partners, new processes, CNC, large software, war, fund society, over research, use states have to go, so use sanctions, assurances, and restrain their country government, takes F states, most tolerate number of research from more people, so we're seeing deterrence.
Ready?
No, let me get water. Okay, yeah.
Okay, status?
Conditional.
Okay, first counter plan. Confused about spillover. Do you need to win that more general strikes happen after the fiated strike the counterplan does?
No.
Okay, why would it spill over to other issues like surveillance?
The Gonzalez evidence indicates that when people strike, the broad militant activity is directed at corporate threats. Those corporate threats include things like the surveillance that corporations do and the harm to the environment that corporations do.
Yeah, but as long as the USFG does like the plan, then the corporations are off the hook. So why would they feel that to end surveillance?
Well, at that point we've solved the entire AFF. So literally a 0.001% risk of the net benefit means a negative value. Like if you go for, but the USFG will immediately cave, so there's no net benefit. It's like, great, thanks for solving the AFF.
Okay.
Obviously.
The bottom counter plan.
Yeah.
Which part of the plan does the counter plan not do?
It conditions the rights. So the plan gives the rights unconditionally. The counter plan does not.
So just a certain.
It also is not rights.
It doesn't give them rights.
Well, it
What does that mean?
conditions collective bargaining. It does not condition collective bargaining rights.
So they don't
We
have a
think
right
that
to
rights
collectively
must be-
bargain?
No, it conditions collective bargaining. You did not specify what that means. When Steve asked you, you just kept being like, well, CBRs, CBRs, CBRs. So it's going to be a little silly when the 20C stands up and is like, precisely, it is this
Okay,
right
how-
that is the one that matters.
how much
because
money-
Steve gave you the chance and you didn't do it.
How much money do you think the counterplan creates for AI
The
research?
first card says 30.716 billion.
And that's sufficient to make all
Uh-huh.
AI safe?
Well, the second
the
card
world?
says, we actually, the 1NC cards have the numbers if you read them, but the second card, let me find the number. Yeah, it says about 40 million per year. So 30.7 billion is what it would
Wait,
raise.
40 million per year
per
makes
year?
AI safe in the entire world.
Well, that's what our card literally says. So yeah, that's what I'm going with.
Okay, the politics dissad, E15 is key so that farmers can sell ethanol to U.S. consumers in the summer. Is that
Is that a
that's the
question?
argument? Is that the argument? Why is E15 key to?
E15 is key to, so right now there's about 2.4 billion bushels of corn that have been overproduced. E15 increases the demand, which means it mops up the excess supply, which increases farm profits, because right now the excess
only
supply
during-
is tanking the price of corn. The plan
So,
increases demand, which
Currently,
increases the price.
it's E15 in every season besides summer. Is that true?
Well, with exceptions in certain states and certain federal exemptions, so like, no.
Okay, but what are those exceptions?
Well, California banned it entirely, I think like one other state, but it's one in the Northeast, I'm
And
not
this
remembering
bill
who is.
overrides that?
Well, yeah, it's a federal bill, so yeah, like preemption.
Okay, the midterms dissad. Why is Trump not already nuclear testing?
Why is Trump not nuclear testing?
Yeah.
I mean, he wants to be, but the Dems
He
won't
has-
block it.
No, but he has the GOP now. He's had it for 2 years, or he will by the time the midterms happen. Why didn't he nuclear test?
I don't know why he hasn't yet. Presumably, like, things are slow to pass in Congress. Like, shit takes time. I don't know.
Okay. Have we nuclear tested before? Or when's the last time we nuclear tested?
I don't think the U.S. has in, like, a long, long time. I don't think actually anybody has. The Smith card says there's an international moratorium on it right now.
Okay.
It says the current moratorium on nuclear testing. Direct quote.
10. Stop it.
9:45.
Sorry, Gabe. Same. Give you out.
Wait, real quick. We're good? Yep. 9:44.
Oh god, dude.
Yeah, I couldn't do it.
Steve, can I use your things? It's a little funny. Yeah, no. Zach got the mix sliders.
Where you going, Zach?
That's what I'm saying.
Alright.
Okay, it's sent. Do we,
Yeah, I got it. I'm good for a number.
can you scoot forward so I can keep this fine? Actually, that's stable enough. Okay, advantage 1, bureaucracy. Advantage 2, signaling. A spec. T subs. The conditions counterplan, the AFL counterplan, politics, midterms.
I'm good.
Panel also good. Awesome. Okay. Yes, I sees secure evidence strong, he listens because loyalists are not in zero, which is the direct evidence, and Trump does not need to listen, he just be perceptually strong bureaucracy, that's just shows their evidence. Shapiro votes out, Shapiro 20, factions more than Alice leaders, MS by friends that I listen to a variety of experts that when evidence is wrong, perceptions cannot solve every expert workers are fired and new ones are hired, and new ones that are hired are MAGA crazy per F inherency whistleblower protections also do not solve our impact, it's about worker morale and experts correcting Trump wrongdoing, or if they appeal, it causes backlog in the OSC, which means the MSPB sides of Trump or when I see solvency evidence protection and solvency evidence, a law false evidence is wrong, no groupthink impact, 1 bureaucrats are diverse and a public service minded, which no evidence, 2 groupthink is irrelevant, signaling and expertise are the only internal links required for our impacts, that's Schuessler and monument evidence, Ramon evidence is wrong, that Ramon is not declined inevitable, it's Trump is bad, that is our argument, he's eroding protections of firing workers, which puts it on the brink for recency, our evidence says 2026, March Madness is unprecedented, yes, polycrisis, James evidence is wrong, threats are interconnected bureaucratic turbulence, dismantles the expertise required to save off existential risks, there, James evidence says AI is the solution, but does not assume the diminished capacity of AI from bureaucratic failures, which means the solutions are impossible, that's the nomic evidence, even if they are old, they still matter, their author agrees, like, yeah, the 24 hours we learn from every revolution, every crisis the government said their problem makes the question how to do it, James, 2017 project management matter cycle grid, challenges now, finally, the flex turn is wrong, 1 thumpers, A60 or Sue, Sue 25, the federal employees that allergic collective bargains since the 60s, B, the VA, that's the one you see, that's the one you see, C, rehire, Trump is hiring now, so the plan is priced in which the cornfield evidence, 2, no link, the plan is equilibrium, price, or narrow scope, which is small, so evidence, 3, no, non-unique in link turns, A, efficiency, bargaining guarantees, a union voice while checking back against where abusive workplaces, and then increasing info sharing, creating a more effective bureaucracy, which is the Kepler evidence, B, productivity, union voice, boost morale, causing higher engagement and good faith requirements, requirements which ensures productive talks, that's the Kepler evidence. Now, advantage, what, exemptions have been in the status quo for decades. Security agencies have already been exempted. The plan sets a minimum threshold. A majority solves all the vast majority of stuff. The advantage durable fiat also includes all of the agencies that are relevant. Now, the signaling advantage proper. Schuessler and ICE are wrong. Things like apprenticeship training and reversing impoundment happen as a result of the after union negotiation and union training. Our evidence says CBRs are what adversaries look to whenever they determine whether adversaries and allies look to whenever they determine whether they should aggress or partner with us. Yes, impact for the Putin stuff. American weaknesses existential. Trump cannot credibly deter without bureaucratic tools to back his that Greenland's Russian expansionism with Titans and miscalculated great power risk, which is a Snyder and fever evidence. Russia is not cooked in the status quo. The star evidence is not. It does not assume Putin mentality of expansion, and even if their military forces are depleted, they can still aggress against the United States and cause miscalculation. The Shockey evidence is incorrect. This was written when CBRs existed, so yes, alliances were resilient in 2021. Now, yes, China war alliance collapse is existential. Extended American deterrence causes it caps at Tinderbox and Indo-Pacific and deters Taiwan invasion. Both go nuclear, but only if our allies doubt credibility of our bureaucracy, which is the Schuessler evidence. Tariffs do not thump the trade impact because they were struck down, and allied trade was still stable during the time, but protectionist trade is existential because trade pacifies tensions, which is the Al-Udabi evidence. Yes, proliferation. The forces preemptive use of strikes and incentivizes reactionary nuclearization, which is the brand's evidence. Now, A-spec, we specify the USFG and answer to cross-examination. Counter absolutely have to specify as much resolution preferred. A-spec causes infinite regress as Senator spec causes actor counter skills, fairness, education, cross-exponential limits, punishing the vagueness strikes use of reasonability, procedural cost, substance credit out T. Substantially, 1, we meet. A, textually, anyone can be a federal worker. B, functionally, plan only objective standards. 2, counter certain command. Between 1 and CBOs and interesting now to remedy substantially key determination whether agreement prevent units from the collective bargaining however practical effect also non-functional in the scope of the CBRs like circuit held with no interest in substantial non-division to litigation was substantially affecting CBRs workers are divisible Westlaw and no dates out worker individual and the culture to deploy. I prefer 1 precision and predictability. A, only evidence of the concept of CBRs. B, law of the land because it cites Supreme Court. C, grammar substantially modifies the years verbiage strength. And D, their interpretation is in the concept of charitable tax expenditures inserted for reference that outweighs the control species and prepping and determines it debatably. 2, Afghan federal workers are key to beat pigs to 3, no impact. A, limits of the absence USFG CBR key and germane advantages. B, ground the CBR pick beats 99% absent 2% but it cannot possibly solve reasonability classified from above the conditions counter plan permutation do the plan and research and AI text inserted permutation do the plan and fund AI research also inserted permutation do both solves by conditioning employment permutation do the counter plan. It's a reasonable way to do CBRs. They have not introduced a competition argument. Counter plans need to publish solvency advocates key publish comparative solvency advocates key to Afghan because we cannot answer counter plans that do not exist in literature and leads to better more research focused debate. The counterplan leads to immediate nuclear war because they don't have a card saying it solves anything. Conditions counterplans are bad. They steal the app, and there's not comparative deficits or app defense reject. The team does not solve case. 1, federal workers are already underpaid. They cannot afford to pay for AI research. Researchers Bruno evidence. 2, trust of CBRs can be taken away at any point. No one would want to work in the environment or in that environment, which is the Dvorak evidence. Net benefit. 1, the counterplan is a tiny amount of AI research. No evidence quantifying that it would solve. 2, most innovation happens in the private sector anyway, which solves anyway. The U.S. leads the AI race now, but the counterplan is trying to take over fields. 26. The U.S. leads in the AI race, but has never been more uncertain. Policymakers must ensure America does not squander its Beijing wants to see China become the global superpower. Models are cheaper to develop and try to maintain those leading must have an attractive investment environment for low regulation to enable innovation. This is already happening over regulation cycles of American growth. Mark the card at growth. Now the AFL-CIO counterplan permutation to both. Permutation to the counterplan mandate competition is bad. Should not certain piper and one should mean plus except in acceptable cases of possible interpretation. That should means there's some discretion for certain competition is bad, which besides the idea plan if it's good. Infinite constant fairness class permutation to AFF as a result of the counterplan should line immediate brown. 8 word should look to future considering possible future advanced condo is a voter restrictions and strategy strategies punishing a responsibility and disincentivize. Shall research this post often kick fast as permit theory permutation to the plan and the counterplan over something else. Zach will send out the text. Zach will send out the text and insert and execute fiat the government but not private organizations. That is key to fairness and anything else that involves an infinite mindset fiat or world peace decimated Afghan for no impact immediacy is key. A rehire any delay or uncertainty. Lots of Trump stuff. The executive has subsequent evidence. B adversaries were on the brink now. Any continuation of great power decline triggers great power. Well, that's the fever. That's the fever evidence. Fever evidence. General strike collapses the economy and fails. It strikes zero union power. Thomas attempts to general strike refuse the economy. The factors he's operating because operating just in time to deliver jobs that disrupt industries and business knock-on effects. People can knock in the office at a close station down. Have the impact these issues have the impact on barriers to disruption on these successes. So they only cause a pot too many people across India and that is give up at a union and for the negotiated agreement that starts accept by the union's quite a few years. The terminal to the counter plan is just a surveillance state which is solved by the app because it decreases Trump and allows whistleblowing. Now E15 decide will not pass, but it will not pass bar net 3 to question whether E15 will pass around the Congress after 10 years. Small it says from perspectives in the Congress so progress you cannot get an obstruction on a vote. Through EPA unilaterally allows E15 EPA through 25 EPA to waive for national that E15 will extend as long as the use by one such action. GOP uniformity is low now. Brooks 326 at around shutdown and an informative version of because that creates a GOP division of the ability in the House and unanimous support in the factions. I conversation the community could be reduced starting to show cracks in support for Veronica about the safety and ethanol industry is record high. Hydro 35 US ethanol hit a record demand set biofuels that are national blend rates 10% of production remains strong in the rural economies that are record ethanol production is reinforcing demand for US farms supporting stability year long. Bills are irrelevant. That is above the plan. It does not link to the decide because that is already passed that. It is already passed the House. That is the one I see evidence food insecurity does not cause war. If I see N18 there's a little merit in the notion that a reduction of the access to food increases confidence on our people. They have the means of the epic starvation on the position of answers and apprehension of the social and isolated future source of discontent on the complex of political structural and corruption desire to perform economic problems. No environmental extinction is a long term and it does not solve no internal link. One the plan Zach, can you get me the plan part past the House card? The midterm decide. The case turns and outweighs the decide signals deterrence and prevents proliferation to non-unique or Republicans in the House and Senate. That's CPR 26 and Constitution 326 or other issues of McCarty. 325 also in trouble warning of political blood theory growing by 21 points at 21 because papers that makes a given only 7 majority this applicable the worst result for the measurement history. The latest in a series of upsets in the states of special election different kind of special election forecast of the emissions or effects that the property was hospital health social taking issues important to the voters possibility and inflation far away. Any other issues mark the card and other issues no link to 123 no one else with the government does have up against economic goes to the Congress and the agency and make the decision to be completely invisible to the public. Mark card at public Trump steals the election code 26 year declares a national emergency law Trump to take control of everybody security against foreign interference cycling China and interfered in 24 now it's from like 6 years of Trump stuff now impact on nuclear testing it's happening in the status quo per their evidence Trump does not need Congress want to see parts 25 short cuts in nuclear system and where reveals how they civil every nuclear national emergency wave applicable statutory and regulatory concerns. It's also unlikely when see Part 25 some sort of people testing. However, this is unlikely. The plan solves internal by deterring proliferation. The Democrats advertise on other issues. He has 124 to identify sharpening focus on affordability, housing, because we call it complex. So disaster in the economy organization has a strong position to talk. And the majority. I'm good.
Okay. Let's start on waivers or on E15. The EPA card that you read says that EPA extended waivers that allow nationwide sale to B15. Do you know how long those waivers apply for?
It says until they're out of supply.
Where?
The EPA card says, like the last line is until we
no, it says that EPA is willing to extend waivers. But when the EPA gives a company a waiver, do you know how long that waiver lasts for?
The EPA evidence says that waiver will be extended as long as a fuel supply warrants such action. So as long as we have ethanol that we can sell, that action is thus warranted, so the waiver extends.
Okay, let's talk about this GOP Unity Loan Out card.
Yeah.
Let's start with the DHS. So the Senate passed a bill that House Freedom Caucus didn't like that bill, and Johnson was like, we will shut down the government because the HFC didn't like the bill that the Senate passed. Why does the DHS controversy
Well, firstly, the Senate's not in session, so they can't even pass that bill.
Well, you
They're
did
all
say that in
restricted
Swayze,
on that.
so answer the question, please.
Why? So Johnson sent
Johnson
the bill back.
did exactly what the HFC wanted because they were going to get mad at him, and he was like, "Oh shit, I don't want to make y'all mad over the DHS bill." Johnson caved and said, "We won't pass the Senate's
So
version."
our
So
evidence
why does it
says
thump?
there's
Their
like
card is 2 days old.
fractious conferences. Even if the HFC is like united over the Iran bill, they're not united over other things, and Republicans
Like,
broadly are not united over the Iran bill.
Oh, so you're going for Iran, not DHS? Because my
What?
question was about the DHS.
Oh,
bill.
yes.
But your answer
Even
was
if they
about-
are united over, even if HFC is united over that,
Okay,
other
let's
Republicans
actually.
are not.
So you are saying HFC, but this card's actually not about the HFC. It's about moderate Republicans, or at least doesn't specify. So
The Brooks evidence.
yeah.
Yeah, like if Republicans are not unified over those things, there's not unity. Like even if the dissent says HFC is important for the bill, other Republicans being fractious means that the bill will not pass.
Okay, let's talk about your won't pass card. There are questions whether year-round E15 will pass. This seems like a pretty good NEG break card. No?
The next line is it's been kicked around in Congress for 10 years and has never passed.
Uh-huh.
Like this is like this dissent is
But
like
this is predictive
like
where?
farm
Like
bill
we read a
matter.
predictive card, and you read a card about the past.
Yes,
So why
in-
should we care?
Empirically being kicked around in Congress for 10 years is a pretty good warrant for why there's not a brink right now for the bill to pass, or why it's not TOA for any Republican agenda.
Okay, let's talk about the condition counterplan. You said Fed workers are already underpaid. According to what card?
The Bruno evidence is
Bruno?
actually
Okay.
pretty specific on this. Says they
I
take
just
a pay
you didn't
cut
say
to
card in
work.
this way, so I want to know. And
I
then
did
Does
say
the
that.
plan allow them to negotiate over wages?
No.
okay, so if they're
Like,
already underpaid and
they've
the app
never
doesn't allow them
made-
to
like, we-
negotiate over
we
wages,
answered
why is
that
this a
in process.
comparative deficit?
Because
It's
they lose wages in the counterplan.
Yeah, they're
to
giving
pay
away
for-
what 4.4%.
But you said they're already underpaid. You've literally just thumped your own deficit. You were like, they
No.
already aren't getting paid enough. Why not give a little bit away to save the world?
Okay, that's like the distinction of like Thumper and real world about how people would think. Like that's not a debate Thumpery question. It's like they are paid $60,000 a year. There's no reason why they would want to get paid what like $45,000 a year because they're already super underpaid. They're not going to give that money away to just have a bargaining right.
Okay.
You gotta find your
Okay,
260
I got it.
governments.
That's what everyone says.
Just, you have to say words because they said words, you know? Sorry, what was the second card you read on midterms? You, like the tag I floated was other issues, but there's like 7 cards that.
Oh, it's the very first one.
McCarty?
Yeah.
And you marked it somewhere?
It was literally at the very end. I marked it before the word party. It's like the last sentence highlighted was not right. It was marked in between
Got it.
discipline.
Yep. And then you also marked the Nolan card?
Yeah, that was marked at completely invisible to the public before once you get past the
Invisible to
cops.
public. Yep.
short?
Do you want to use the?
No, it's fine.
Ours is short.
Yeah, there's just like.
Yeah,
No, this.
Quick rope up.
I'm tall enough for this.
Whatever you say.
Huh?
Whatever you say.
Come on, no, don't do that.
Yeah, he's at least 6'1", guys.
Well, my driver's license says I'm 6'11", so
That's actually true.
which is not a lot.
Is that
Yeah,
Dude,
Yeah,
McLovin
like-
ass ID, bro.
like 16. Yeah, 16.
Well, so I thought it would be
year-olds
really
even,
funny.
yeah.
So I tried to put 5'11", and the guy gave me the ID back and was like, it was clearly a typo. I put 6'11", and a 16-year-old me would be like, this would be the funniest thing ever if until I was 21, I'm legally 6'11". So now it's on my driver's license. I've never been pulled over, so I really don't know what would happen if
Nobody's gonna knock out the
they
person
saw that I
being pulled
wasn't
over.
6'11". So,
You're getting a lot done. What's your?
the AFL-CIO counterplan, the conditional bargaining counterplan, the bureaucracy advantage, and then the signaling advantage. Panel good? Kansas? Cool. AFL-CIO conceded the permutation just a test competition, solving the benefits irrelevant. It's a conditional word in the case. Solves argument and is on evidence. Condo was good. Counter turbo we did. One NEG flex F sat backing sat rise the next means more conditional aptitudes. Tier reactor strategy. 2 processing debates with multiple rules challenge. You have to sift through information. Make tactical in-round decision which increases critical thinking skills. 3 argument innovation. Debaters will introduce new strategies unless they have a new fallback option. And alternatives. However, NEG research 4 logic proving the counter plan is bad. Does not prove the plan is good. There's no offense. 1 condos inevitable new apps. Add-ons link turns of pertinent explanation. 2 diminishing marginal utility. Infinite condos unstrategic because arguments inevitably overlap. 3 dispose bad because unless the choice determine block strategy and there's no community consensus, even if the choice defined it. Now, the conditional bargaining counterplan, it solves the case, conditions the ability for federal civilian employees to bargain based on salary contributions. Federal workers want to collectively bargain, so they say yes, which is Smith framed through the lens of sufficiency. Even if it's a perfect deficit, have to cause extinction to outweigh the net benefit. Compare the counterplan to the status quo. Not the plan. The choice was a swing and the miss. Federal workers say yes, it's dropped 1 and C cars. So federal workers want CBRs to constrain Trump into bureaucratic functions, which is both R1 and C evidence and everything they said on the case, which solves the entire app. Even if some say no, the vast majority agree, which is sufficient to solve the net benefit in the case. And there's obviously no impact to a deficit of some workers not being able to do it because they said exemptions of the status quo. I mean, there's no terminal impact now. The first 2 permutations, you can group them because they're intrinsic and fiat's unconditional funding for artificial intelligence, which is present in neither plan or counterplan, which is functionally intrinsic by adding an element that's neither plan or counterplan. It's a voting issue limited. It's an arbitrary and subjective standard that snowballs into all that intrinsicness and makes winning DA links, Ks, and ban counterplans impossible to contrive terms like perm to the plan and ban federal workers. It's legit under their standard, not mutually exclusive, and solves every DA too. It's vague, rejected. We cannot answer it substantively since we don't know how the perm functions. Reject 1 AR. Make clarification since Q-Stick strategy 3 doesn't solve anything. Paying means nothing. Only grant solves subjecting AA to the politics of appropriation. Makes long-term planning impossible from CR Stewart. And 24 federal funding for AR and D difficulty compounded by CRs and irregular appropriation was limited adequate planning for fiscal years. Now, do both links into the net benefit. 1, it's mutually exclusive for severance, making rights waivable. Weaken CBRs, the opposite of the plan crossed by definitions from permanent counterplan, which will do low AFGE 25 make. For employees that will enforce pay 4.4%, they want to retain rights to organize and join a union for those who opt not to pay for these rights. They can be fined for any reason. 2, it doesn't solve the net benefit. The perm simultaneously does the plan where they get CBRs for free while offering a version where they pay for them. Workers would obviously choose a version of bargaining rights, which doesn't require pay cut. 3, reject 1 AR clarification. Do both is not a complete argument. We might have read a different block if it was a different version of the argument. Do counterplan is severance. It's a voting issue for fear for conditionality, which destroys net ground. 1, collective bargaining rights. Continuance is mandatory, not permissive. Speaker and 24 plain language compel conclusion. Collective bargaining rights continuance is mandatory rather than permissive. Conditioning rights makes it a legal privilege, not a legal right. Jackson and 19. If a democracy is permitted to rescind rights, those rights are not rights, but legal privileges. 2, strength. Think requires increasing its ability to withstand opposing considerations. Wide Roman 23 rights have 2 features. Scope and strength. Strength consistent powers to withstanding opposition. Withstanding opposing considerations. Strength is not susceptible to limits. It weakens CBRs, but giving workers the choice to waive their rights. David Alvin 20 weakening of labor law brought in the rich equal workers in scope would have choice to waive certain rights. 3, substantial precludes interference. Ashman and 3, impact must be permanent. Substantial this precludes impairments in a wider way. Prefer 1, limits their entry, opens the floodgates. Doesn't condition asset conditioning rights on arbitration and not striking, etc. 2, ground their interpret laws asset condition current CBRs making the topic bidirectional by weakening current rights. 3, no offense rights key warrants like certainty, circumvention, or trust check. 4, presumption if the app permits rights infringement. Future rollback by conservative courts, Congress, or precedent ensured loopholes that nullify effectiveness. Fiat does not solve as per their definitions. They just introduce competition. It competes off rights with the 1T evidence. Solvency advocates, there's no bright line. The 2AC didn't include a terminal impact of this, so the 1AR doesn't get any, but we read a 1T card advocating for the counterplan, which proves there's a solvency advocate. There's no reason the counterplan would necessarily result in immediate nuclear war. The counterplan would, they dropped the federal workers say yes, so the counterplan immediately results in federal workers re-implementing the plan, but it just begs the question of them being able to commit, being able to contribute their feelings contribute their salaries to AI development. Now, theory is wrong. No link. It's not a process or conditions counterplan. It competes textually and functionally based on multiple words of the plan. We get this counterplan prefer it one, net ground small. And new apps are designed to avoid union back generics, and there's no definition consensus on any words in the red. Counterplans that test CVR's key are necessary corrected to testing. The counterplan is an alternative policy that tests core elements of the 1AC mechanism, like whether collective bargaining should be a right to be strengthened. It's key to portable knowledge and clash. 3, arbitrariness. Competition is the remedy, not theory. It should be determinant of theoretical legitimacy. Their interrupt devolves in a no-neck fiat. No offense. Crossplay from the firm. They've been debating CVR picks all year. 4, reject the argument, not the team. They say federal workers are already underpaid. There's no impact to it. The plan doesn't increase their wages, so it's just a deficit to the case and not the counterplan. So there's no incentive to come back and work. And it's empirically denied by their thumper about them not having the protection. Now, some workers not having protections. Now, the trust deficit, they cannot go for this while exempting workers in the plan text. It zeroes the deficit. And empirically denies all of advantage too, because they said on the case that exemptions have existed for decades. The counterplan is not a tiny amount of funding. The 1T card says it creates billions of dollars, and the industry only requires $40 million a year. This is an uncarded assertion, so you should prefer our evidence. They say most innovation that happens in the private sector alone fails. Crap unit 25. What is right now? Need to step in private sector fix AI on its own market. Incentives drive companies to fix AI. Fails to impact bottom line. Each bad customer services focus on R&D. The private sector less likely to tackle adequately private address some security issues, but unlikely to be significant gaps understanding emerging capabilities, demand costly fundamental research generates little commercial return. Securing AI against attacks require multi-year R&D. Companies can fail to develop these technical included and single gut stepping to fund research at market undersupply by default. Now, the next argument is counterplan. Let's try to take over. This evidence has this field card has no relevance for the counterplan. Just as the U.S. has to create a strong regulatory environment to maintain the lead, which only the counterplan does by ensuring the federal workers pledge consistent funding to the industry. Now, they've dropped the internal link and impact the net benefits. You know it's extinction. AI leadership prevents extinction. A large U.S. lead creates breathing room for AI safety and alignment pressures, preventing misuse or misalignment from causing extinction, and empowering for the AI that mitigates for extinction risk from nuclear war, synthetic pathogens, stones, and space weapons, which is McCaskill. AI upsides and downsides are existential, solves every impact in the case Salmon. And 21 AJ could revolutionize humanitarian disease, solving food security, warming effect greater than blood revolution combined. However, fair to implement controls pose existential threat. AGI is still used for good and bad, respond to issues that threaten existence, cool climate environment, over water security, internet terrorism, cybercrime, new wars, inequality, AMR, and instability in economy, automation, genetic modification, aging. AGI time relevant problems arise because it seems optimality or modifies goals. Dystopian version, including humans becoming extinct. Now it's time to set agenda. Now it also solves the admin state. Unzi in 23, AI allows for how boys communicate and manage bureaucracy. AI can be bounded, ensuring states consistent with law, important for improving operations, but admin agencies difficult to keep the thousands of humans with. In mandates, it's more objective than humans. Estimates in 24, automation ensures decisions are objective, formalizing rules, implementing them executive, and executing, reducing influence, rational and impartial, reducing fraud. Automation makes processing predictable. The bureaucracy advantage. There's enough protection to the status quo to avoid legal orders, and the status quo is simply saying no, appealing to the MSPB or OSC, and congressionally mandated whistleblower protections are sufficient for provide policy autonomy, which is government. Only our evidence speaks, so weaker perception, and says that even in a world without CVRs, whistleblower protections are sufficient because they were congressionally mandated, because they read a card that says Congress is key to certainty. They didn't say that Congress is key to the CVR certainty. It says that Congress is generally certain, so those congressional protections solved. There's no impact to agency laws. Empiric proof they don't utilize expert knowledge and are plagued by groupthink. Groupthink makes agencies less, or makes agencies useless. Lofthouse and 24 administrative agencies exhibit low diversity. Experts have constantly distort quality of info. Science reflect narrow backgrounds. Agencies focus on narrow issues to authorize particular approach employees in the Fed chair. Understanding to accurate economic controls, you're not sure professional lawyers. Fed vulnerable to groupthink decisions leading up to 2008 suffered from insufficient input, which answers every single 2EC warrant about having sufficient people to diversify their opinions. Now, there's no polycrisis impact. It's just a buzzword that's been used to describe trends across human history, intervening global actors, and buffers prevent spirals, which is the James evidence. The 2EC answered the wrong warrant. In the James evidence, they just said that threats are interconnected and does not assume that diminished capacities are evidence says that global capacity to resolve those polycrises is high, and there's global will to resolve them, which means interventions are inevitable. Either way, the counterplan solves all of it, so it's entirely irrelevant, but there's no impact to the 22. If there's reasonably scheduled polycrisis buffer mechanisms with a system for full mechanisms that push against shocks when supply fails to medications. Prices people don't like it when you invade, and they push back when central makes the inflation restraining with interest rates buffers. Push back against problems in addition to the ones that were designed to push against instead of a polycrisis. We get a policy solution. Now, the signaling advantage. Accepting any one decimates solvency, they've read an advantage that rebuilding the entire civil service is critical to eliminating adversarial perceptions of windows of opportunity. If there's a set of workers that are just denied collective bargaining rights, then it obviously impacts the signal that would send to adversaries, but there's no impact. Great power war is wrong. There's no scenario for escalation. Their internal card just says it creates incentive for adversaries, but only mentions Russia by name, which can't escalate. One, it's impoverished. Most of their cities don't have heating or plumbing. Two, NATO is stronger. Russia invasion has catalyzed Ukraine's position as a global military hardware supplier, and expanding NATO membership and defense spending. Yes, star evidence is that the star evidence is great. It says that even if if Putin has the mentality to pursue war, he won't because there's no risk, because he does not have the material capability to do so. Alliances are resilient, even if it was during CBR. Centuries-long relationships have created storms that NATO and others have been able to navigate without fracturing the alliance, because those are based on ideological commitments, not necessary. Presidential administrations no China war. Beijing prefers peaceful reunification. War would be costly to their economy, and there's no fixed timeline or desire for forceful reunification. The PLA is ready. Xi just purged 100 high-ranking military officers, signaling destruction of military loyalty. Prefer U.S. intel assessments from 2026. Trade does not prevent war. States maintain trade even when at war. Empirically proven by Russian Crimea, where trade was stable, and India, Pakistan, where trade increased despite literal soldier signing, which are evidence from 2026. And there's no prolif impact because MBT monitoring, domestic opposition, institutional constraints, and technical barriers prevent allies from getting the bomb. Sanctions also check with Zelensky evidence, which proves even if they have incentive, they cannot necessarily pursue it.
Okay. You good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want to start on the conditions counterplan. According to the counterplan, so people are able to opt out of their collective bargaining rights in the status quo and the bureaucracy. So they're able to say, like, yes, I know I have the right to have a union. I do not want to practice that right. Why do you think that that is not a strengthening of rights?
Why? The counterplan. I'm
Okay,
confused.
so like for the history of collective bargaining in the government, bureaucrats could say I would like to or I would not like to collectively bargain. After the Giannis case, they don't even have to pay agency dues, or they don't have to pay dues to bargain, right? So the plan reverts to that. Which
Janice was about the public sector at the state level.
No. What?
Yes.
Okay,
It's not
so,
about federal workers.
okay, so that is a strengthening of CBRs. They're able to opt out in the status quo. Your competition argument is that you don't
Yeah,
strengthen
Janice weakens CBRs.
What? Yes. Okay, your argument is that you are allowed to opt out in the world of the counterplan, but not in the world of the AFF. The AFF strengthens
No,
rights back to that.
the
Why is that not?
counterplan gives the rights that the AFF would restore under the conditions that they promised to pledge 4.4% of their salaries, which is a weakening of a
Okay,
right.
yes, so it conditions their rights. So they are able to say, no, I do not want to practice my right. I don't want to pay AI funding. I don't want to be in a union. They're able to, their rights are conditioned in the status quo because they're able to say they don't want to be in a union. They don't want to collectively bargain. That's still a strengthening of rights to give them the
Well, I
ability
mean, the
to choose
2EC
that.
said the words "do counterplan," so I'm really
Okay,
excited.
so your answer is, okay, so there's no answer to that. Cool.
What card says the U.S. losing AI race now?
You read a card that says, well, our 1C evidence says we need more funding, which is AI, which is losing race now.
Okay.
Okay, do you think you read a piece of evidence saying the amount of funding that you get from bureaucrats is able to win the AI race in this speech?
Yep.
Which one?
Well, we said that in the 1C, but we also have
What amount of funding
the
is necessary?
Krapeniun evidence says that the private sector might address some, but the public sector is uniquely key because the R&D that occurs in that sector.
Okay, what is the R&D that occurs in the public sector?
I mean, like development and research about artificial intelligence, where systems are going, how they're being deployed, alignment issues, that sort of thing.
What of that is unique to the public sector? Like that is all
It's an
things that
entire
AI
new
companies are
pool of
doing.
money.
Okay, so it's just that there's more money going towards it. Cool. The Turns case, admin state, you've said AI is better at managing the admin state. To my understanding, you don't have a uniqueness argument for AI integration into the admin state, correct?
Well, what do you mean unique, like integration now? Wouldn't that zero our terms case argument?
Do you have evidence saying there is desire for integration of AI into the admin state? I don't understand how this consolidates.
Yes,
because you have cards saying this would be a good idea, but you don't have cards saying it will happen.
Yes, our evidence says that when AI becomes effective through research and development, there is a desire to uptake that in the federal government.
Which evidence do you think substantiates that?
Krapeniun, also the 1 and C card.
Krapeniun is one of secret, right?
Well, we read 1 and 2 and C2.
Okay.
Midterms 15. Your spell.
Yeah, but it's fine.
You need a sec?
No.
Okay. Does anybody else Continuing back to testing, not going for warming, the 2AC didn't have offense. They do not solve the terminal impact because the testing is key, and the 1AC does not solve testing. Even if they solve proliferation, E15, sustainable ag turns and outweighs the case. 1, it outweighs on magnitude, environmental tipping points, guarantee extinction. This answers the last 2AC blue and 24 industrial accidents without all of his medicines, result to 80%. Avoid structure 50% GGs, loss of soil, loss of body, and disruptions and disease epidemic from touch by site. These general resistance for question necessary the world effects that are more for nuclear people now than any time history industrialized natural failure. That means to be for industrial systems, nature-based systems that use agroecology. Second, food insecurity. It causes drawn and escalates to great power war, which overwhelms tracks marine toward ever become more dangerous. Using the most dangerous weapons has to become more likely. Russian has to provide nuclear attack with Russia with using nuclear weapons. Doctors use the attack against Russia, but now nuclear weapons with the support of nuclear power because it has joined Putin thrust dramatically. Lower the barrier for distributing lower nuclear just China's rapid expansion of this nuclear force, further raising the nuclear rebels. Attack AI dangerously animates CNC. That also solves the case. Food security deters conflicts. Cousins in 2100 is an element of foreign military foreign policy addressing hungry upload resist military presence for recover from a while. Creates food security possible reverse use. Food security is a weapon against conflict. Food security provides resistance against conflict. Threat control. The cost of running and just get rid of conflict created preventative mechanism. Framing issue. The tweet contains zero evidence or thoughts that were specific to the HFC and no offense to all direction errors of neg. The link alone turns case. Fiat doesn't solve because it's external. Fine. In 20 concession boys from legislative process for implementation boards and efficacy secure concessions of laws production and penalties features to outrage separate enforcement various subject cards employer impulsive or implementation shape enforcement and practice by agency commitment to enforcement and strong authority agency operations and legal judges. It turns advantage 1 even if we have X words we have no food or environment, which is a specific trigger that the 1AC generic scenario it lacks. Also the environment turns polycrisis because it's a stressor of everything else. The 2AC did not say case solves that it says that the 1 year shouldn't get to. E15 it also turns advantage to E15 insta solve fuel spikes and energy security. Lean 26 E15 now different fuel bursts spike cost by around over 48 hours increase in 8% over time for Congress and SRV's ability to stay more novel E15 with half the crew that we get from OPEC that caps war through an effective military SRM. Lean 26 is unreliable affordable energy relation we recognize for military also rely on advanced technical road systems as capabilities require best power resilient to energy to function in and effectively energy and security areas of resilient to energy system revolves against the ripple effects and beyond war zones. 1 and C Sikorsky also says it turns Russian and Chinese aggression because they perceive weakness in food and the 2AC didn't answer and it was explicit in the card. 2AC 1 was uniqueness. Wrong. Round E15 will pass. It's top of the docket and there's GOP unity now. That's 1 and 2 Con. It's all about GOP unity and we control it. They're crafting the bill and it overcomes Senate opposition. NEG controls the internal link of House GOP Commission, which is why it'll pass. P1 and 26 the council has allowed multiple use hash differences members representing ag and those and oil results make a feel see side one where said the hope negotiation for the House needs to organize one side and hold these were very through on the same page as me. Encouraging for E15 they reached an agreement that structured out the mass between competing interests after all excluded them to love. Now the Senate still E15 champions are armaments and they have an agreement now they will go back from Monkers as well. The AFP is one of the revision version of the E15 bill. Senate hoping that the constability find compromise will be the key constable is moving in the right direction and that goes to cost optimism will be on track. But this is a Congress a lot of things that happen. It will pass and tops the docket, but it's reversible. Barnett 326 time for Congress to act on long-term optimistic bill brought before the House soon closing agreement product much negotiation. The API compromise is sufficient if the HFC is on board buyers. The 26 when the House passes the purposes that bill that out is A15 if opposition blocks between AG opposed A15 some of the members to until the expanded market could improve the oil making this company if you will make a company we can work in a smart way pick up enough goods that we're about the industry. E15 tops the docket and will pass. Everyone in 26 big goal. Give us a buzz and that they work for it so much. We're very much in favor of E15 who's really common ultimately getting even that's the top of his priorities. Prefer our evidence. Theirs is from a farmer who does not know about internal Senate dynamics. But ours is from insiders. 2AC2 was waiver solve. It's wrong. They are only year-round permanent. E15 can solve farmer profit and market certainty. Also preempt state level restrictions. AOA in 26 a permanent legislative solution still needed for the economy to realize market needs long-term certainty. Farmers necessarily need legislation that will deliver year-round rates like I stop by waivers by this Congress. Act quickly. E15 shift down the federal restrictions. Also state policies. California regardless of the season. Waivers don't solve. They only last for 20 days at the start of the summer. Laying in 26 EPA released a temporary waiver. The waivers on May 1st last still May 20th. The EPA noted 20 days max window. They could authorize summer waivers are temporary and insufficient bathing. And then 26 EPA grants over summer stage bar and bureaus as burn authorization which man 24 bushels under the annual release now insurgents past permanent. E15 mark that E15. Next was thumbers. You should prefer issue-specific uniqueness. It assumes the thumbers and says E15 will pass regardless. They don't apply. 1. Our internal link is specific to that HFC. Generic controversy now. Evidence has proof is relevant to them. 2nd, sequencing. It's top of the docket, which is Zimmerman. I read specifically DHS. It's a neg argument or dissent about the HFC. And Johnson caved to the HFC by prolonging the shutdown because they were so important. Down please. In 26, Johnson agreed in meeting the FFC, but continue to see the fronts on DHS include ICCP and the Senate bill and move prolonged shutdown. How that because it was to sink a bill. Distinction between the plan and the thumper. 1. Johnson is massaging HFC concerns, but the plan is a bulldozer and spending can't be managed. 2nd, inter versus intra-chamber. HFC is mad at the Senate, but the dissent is about them being mad at the House. Burks in 26 House UBO was actually Senate deal that was Bush Johnson for House FC membership. Often by the show so proud. Speaker Johnson, Iran does not thump. Green in 26 Robertson discussing the one leave physical thing for physical. No to be proper process just spending it because they're for Iran seems slim. There's not even an Iran bill yet, so it cannot apply in the short term. Save Act. The dissent is about party unity, but the Save Act is not controversial to the HFC. They're not mad at Johnson, and it's all directed at the Senate, which is irrelevant. Next was ethanol demand high now. Their hurdle evidence is old and long term. The threshold for farm profitability doesn't require ending all demand for corn ethanol. Our argument is that farmers are struggling now, and new demand side pull is key. Even if demand is higher than past years, our internal link isn't demand, it's farmer profit, which is low. And even though demand is up, it's still insufficient because production outstripped it. Only E15 solves all that. Blooming. 26 after France, my seller reported record covering the demand strong production using more than also the demand increase. So where to go from here? 15 next round, you're ready 50% of the path to great growth. You want to see last roll. After measurable effect, transition to 2.4 billion bushels. That would help our price without a dramatic increase. Next was the analytic that year 15 year round is irrelevant. It's key. Even a 1% increase in upstream sales would be huge, and it causes a 5% increase, which is the Bloom card I just read. And now the link, extend the HFC link. Firing fed workers is the cost-saving card that GOP leaders play to buy HFC votes on spending packages that they would otherwise take, which is like prefer is reverse causal and specific to the app. House already did the plan is negative. This would help House Republicans, they said, but not HFC because they hated the app, which is inserted. Last thing was Food Wars Impact D. Cross-apply the card from the overview. It doesn't apply. 1, uniqueness. Even if they are coming now, score success more inevitable. 2nd, specificity. Their card isn't. It drops US, Russia, China, West, and Africa, Iran. 3rd, imperial. We've already drawn in. Here's another card. Castellan 18, US Basin. The worst ISIS creating nuclear around competition for Russian, China, as well as Western security, possible sharp family migration, new immigrants for extremist fashion, stable prices reduced, and stable countries and security leading stability on the Middle East, Africa, Asia, destabilizing population, gender, conflicts, national food price, all with riots, American unparalleled. Marked it unparalleled.
And 944.
Yep. Sorry. You did it.
That's one.
I have link card and what?
If you're doing that, but the link card.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I'll start there.
Advantage 1, bureaucracy. Advantage 2, signaling. Counterplan, just that.
I'm still downloading.
English gonna stay good?
Mhm.
Camel? Okay. Bureaucratic collapse, characters extinction, hollow agency lack the expertise, security responses like cascading crises like climate change, food shortages, super cyber attacks, nuclear meltdowns, pandemics, emerging tech that's had economic, periodically error acts. It's possible to know what past crises were prevented by federal agencies who are working behind the scenes that can no longer function. Mixed idea inevitable because the EPA is key to enforce the E15, but their job that they're hollowed out now protections they exist but can't be enforced because unions are the only way to amount raw resource legal defenses. That's a handler evidence. It's literal more madness. No one knows what's happening unless litigation workers choose civil service because of job security, which is totally gone now. So something the counterplan cannot solve. Yes, agency losses they don't. The evidence that assumes Trump what he's doing is totally unprecedented. Level grouping is good because it means they do leftist things and solve agency can collapse. James has no warrant. We've listed the impacts in the overview, so this cannot be our point. There's no the Smith card is about policy solutions, which are our point for why bureaucratic functions are key. Those solutions, but those can't exist now. Okay, now signaling advantage. Exemptions is 0 1. They've always included the military have always existed. It does not overcome certainty. Second, we get durable fiat, which guarantees complete implementation of the plan. At a minimum, you are certain the plan strengthens for the CBRs for the vast majority of federal workers, so they don't get to say Lincoln turns case on the DA either. Yes, impact your institutional failure, ensure triggers Russian war, perceived weakness, green lights versus aggression against Belarus and the Baltics. The U.S. response to nuclear escalation. That's a cider fever evident. Ukraine is wrong. Russia will emerge victorious because of U.S. bureaucratic collapse. That is a springboard for further aggression westward, driven by Crimea being a precursor. 2022, when you see Beckley prices in Russia's losses, but says that their large population, natural resources, and state-controlled economy will let them rebuild. Plus, their shoulders are now battle-tested. Alliance collapse is also existential. It causes Taiwan invasion. China doubts these commitments. Invade the kickstarts nuclear escalation. That's the war. That's the war. That's from war games. That's Peter's evidence making this card in 2021 cards. They can't assume the squo and its facts policy card for us because that's written when CBRs did exist. Retaliation is crumbling because NATO, our relations are crumbling because NATO is actively holding meetings without the U.S. security agreements or lapsing as per 1C Schlusser. War is less costly when American bureaucracy is too, and China doesn't think that we can respond. Pool of causes extinction from preemptive pressure. Established rivals will strike first before nukes get developed. Plus, nuclear states reciprocate via user-loser doctrine and crisis. See if it's wrong. Trump has reset geopolitics. The first proliferator will spark a chain reaction that triggers regional nuclearization and then global nuclearization. That's brings evidence security concerns or outweigh sanctions and the NPT, and they cannot check when the American alliance commitment is totally unstable. Okay, the counterplan. Perm to the counterplans with to strengthen CBRs for federal workers. Before our interrupts for competition, it's bad. It justifies control counterplans that seal the AFF because counterplan can leverage CBRs on something that no one cares about to lead any deficit. It's destroys education by proliferating generics that console, recommend, etc. that obviate core topic research. Those are unpredictable and skew the AFF. Their definitions are wrong. First, they say CBRs are mandatory. The counterplan links because it creates mandatory CBRs if workers pay after workers pay for the AI. The counterplan is just permissive. Then solves under the case because allowing Trump to ignore the counterplan whenever he wants means it can't solve. Legal rights are privileges that result from any law. Criminal law 12A privilege held by the result of statute or other legally enforceable claim. Jackson is not a legal definition. In fact, it's only a definition of the counterplan because it says, quote, these are not rights in a meaningful sense. Their counterplan also strengthens because it means rights to overcome opposing interests after workers pay for the AI stuff. If they don't, then again it's presumption because it can't be a weakening of rights because those rights don't even exist now. Strengthen means to be more effective. Cambridge 24 strengthen makes it more effective. Substantial is not an exclusive term. So bar 17 actually we read this card in the 2AC and they define substantial in the 1NC, so they don't get to counterfine one with a official one in the 2NC. The 1ER did not answer the 2C show definition on the AFL-CO counterplan are only justify uncertainty for counterplans, but not for disads. Winning this counterplan is the way the counterplan can be done does not mean it's the most likely way to interpret the plans, but still get other limits in ground, and we cannot nullify disads by saying the counterplan or the plan is not immediate, so it beats, and also beats their presumption argument. Okay, the deficit. The 2EC did not job workers say yes. We said that federal workers are already underpaid, they cannot afford to pay for AI research, and they would say no to the counterplan and not choose to join the union and thus not pay for AI. Second, trust. If counterplans be taken away at any point, then no one would want to work in that environment. That's the work evidence. Only the plan is familiar and trusted that the counterplan does one condition. The workers think that more conditions could come in the future, and thus they would not trust the counterplan. Okay, now turn the counter or Reich slow down AI. They dropped that and we'll concede China to take over cause extinction. It's just a question of the internal link. First, uniqueness. U.S. is leading now because Trump has deregulated the private sector, kickstarting wave of innovation. That's one in C fields evidence. One card for 2026. Public trust is obviously not key because they're only reading cards about the status of the tech race. Second, Reich's crush the industry and additional hurdles that make innovation harder. So that the counterplay makes it harder to actually innovate AI and outcompete China. Can't solve the case because it requires competent workers to implement the AI in the workforce and it takes forever. No AGI downside impact. Symbol 917. We are to think that AI and species are just two separate intelligence still find something else with magic. Intelligence being doesn't mean it has power. Mark that card adds power. Okay, E15 to set. U.S. ethanol is at a record high. Domestic demand and 10% blend rate international trade agreements. And California E15 approval are more than enough to say in the industry that they have evidence preferred. It disproves uniqueness and internal. This Mountain Creek is not vital to the entire ag industry because ag profits are thriving now. Qualified evidence disproves E15 in summer is key. People don't buy it in the winter because of lacking domestic infrastructure and car makers that say to avoid it. That's with evidence who's professor of agriculture and resource economics who's the most qualified card on this question. The one other highlighted line for us because they said export demand will always remain stellar. Even if the bill is slightly better, they have no reason why extinction is coming now. Even total collapse of the RFS will not remove ethanol demand until 23. Feel that of our spending to not eliminate demand for corn ethanol and crude oil increase in demand from RFS, which represent upper bound for the negotiations associated with its repeal. World markets are fine even without year-round E15 combustion 361. An issue left out is E15. However, use these for new workers for ethanol. American farmers go to Western Africa, the world, Vietnam, want the U.S. ethanol, Japan, Germany, the applauding York. Trade farmers have been strong upside for use ethanol. UK 50% more access. They say it needs to be permanent. Laying is wrong. They can just issue another waiver in June. That's what they've done in the past 5 years. The AO evidence is just quoting an ethanol CEO who obviously wants more sales. No actual reason why permanence is key. We've inserted that indict below. They're indicting existing waivers, but they'll just issue new ones. About Article 235. EPA is once again issue waiver law, issuing a second amendment of regulations limiting the sale of E10. The EPA is the unilateral authority to oversee standards. Until 318, the EPA will work with states to reduce unnecessary costs. EPA oversees fuel standards, broader effect will also contain the econ fallout. Okay, nuclear war obviously outweighs it's faster the environmental impacts, and in terms of the DA, because they dropped it, destroys the plan via nuclear winter, it causes kills everyone. That's the one you see. Clear evidence, corn is not the straw that makes it comes back for the entire environment. All international costs like deforestation, climate change, far outweigh. No turns case having food solves one motivation for war, but not all of them. Okay, the link is wrong. No, the link, the plan already passed the House. That means rule means it's just the Senate and President signing it. If it's mishandled by the one in the R, it does not matter if the HT. It's bad at the Senate because it's anchored directly towards them, not Johnson. Here's a card to prove it. With 1211 House, prove it. Measure the rate CB. Star Wars federal works by part of the first House. We'll find EO. Marked at EO.
We had something.
742.
Unless you think you feel like, not do
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
that's that.
I did see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like start that, make sure that gets handled.
Yeah, do whatever. Yeah, whatever you. That.
order is the conditional bargaining counterclaim, the HFCDA, the signaling advantage, and the bureaucracy advantage. Panel, we're good. Kansas. Not going for the counterclaim can see the permutation, but the one AR read a DA to itself. The counterclaim never claimed to result in more AI regs. Instead, it created safety measures for research and development. But in order to solve the poly crisis, the 1AC has to promulgate an entirely new set of regulations required to prevent AI misalignment, which means only the plan results in more AI regulations, and the defense they ran is new and unjustified. We read our impact on the 1AC, and the 2AC said 0 words about it. Their 2AC card says that the AI lead is dependent on a lax regulatory environment, which a plan uniquely upends if they're able to solve the poly crisis, which is an independent ballot you can vote on if we lose every other part of the debate. Now, the HFCDA, sustainable ag outweighs in terms of case 1 magnitude. Industrial ag is an existential threat to all life on Earth, and it's responsible for 80% of all environmental impacts, even if it's slow. Environmental tipping points cascade and nurture all their impacts, even if it doesn't immediately trigger extinction. 2, food insecurity causes drawing from great powers to drop 1 C card. They drop 1 C and 1 in our argument that says the only scenario for window of opportunity is a gap in food security, which only our DRE solves the internal link to. Now, they dropped the link alone turns the case. The 1 AR said 3 words, so that's as many as the 2 AR gets. Fine and Shepherds is a legislative process that ensures the outcome is watered down, even with good faith fiat. So durable fiat cross applications don't apply, and you can massively reduce the risk of the case here. Now, ethanol high now is wrong. Kansas has messed up 2 framing issues on the ethanol high now debate. 1, the distinction between demand and farmer profit are internally. It's about the latter, and they've read 0 cards that profit is high now since there's so much extra supply. They push prices down. Only E15 solves because it sends a durable price signal that applies year round and solves market uncertainty, which is bomb. 2, even if demand is high, only our evidence speaks to the fact that production is still higher, which is part of the top part of bomb evidence. 2, even if demand is high, only our evidence speaks to the fact that production is still higher, which is above. The next card that says nationwide E15 is where we go next because it would increase prices, which solves farm profitability, which is how they have enough money to innovate. The 2EC didn't read the Smith evidence, so the 1 AR doesn't get to extend it since the warrants about summer and winter are new. Recutting is NEG. The next sentence, the next sentence starts with, however, yes, extinction now. They conceded the uniqueness argument about high oil prices due to the Iran war, which means the current moment unique. Kirkpatrick is so NEG. It says the bill is key to everything, and always on time frame. Now, waivers. Permanent E15 is key. 1, long term, which is key to farms since planting. It's key to farms since planting corn takes years. 2, permanence. It ensures economic benefits and profits. Since it's insulated from market shocks and EPA unpredictability. 3, market certainty. It's key to all investment. 4, exceptions. Exemption states are doing their own thing, and more are coming now. The last couple arguments are entirely irrelevant, even if it's quoting an ethanol CNO or CEO. It is necessarily they have the best perspective on the issue and need to only. They have the best perspective on the issue and need to. They actually know what is critical for our internal link. Now the AOI being from an ethanol companies and NEG Prodite, they're telling you what they need, and Lanning says 20 days is the minimum they can authorize. No FS says they can just keep waivers for the rest of the time, and that doesn't solve certainty or permanence. Also drop bath rates, which was permanent causes 2.4 billion more bushes. Jordan evidence does not answer the recutting. There's no take back, so they shouldn't be able to go for this. Nuclear war does not outweigh our internal link is far faster and larger, especially because their thing takes a time to rebuild structural incentives, but the private sector can innovate now, whereas rebuilding the civil service could take decades and rebuilding the credibility with allies could take forever. It means that there's only a risk of our offense. We read evidence that industrial ag is quickly killing us all, and we read access to it from food wars. Yes, link. The link is not about HFC doing the plan, it's about the reaction. They don't have cover for spending, so they take it on E15, which is our carded 1C worded, and they never answered light, which is reverse causal. Now the signaling advantage exemption. The internal link to this advantage is that we have to signal to adversaries that our civil service is strong and protected, and the 2EC zeroed it when they said there are workers in the federal government who empirically don't receive CVRs. This means that there's no perception of adversaries to prevent aggression or reasons for they would necessarily restrain themselves. Now there's no Russia emergence. There's no Russian emergence. They've dropped that there, even if there is a mentality, there's a necessary mentality. There was not capability, and Putin is maybe revisionist but not insane. He knows that he would lose. They also dropped the second word that NATO is stronger and that Russia's invasion has catalyzed Ukraine's position as a global military hardware supplier. Our evidence from 2026 and assumes a current state of the conflict where theirs is from 2025 and does not necessarily assume current conflict incentives. It means that there's only a risk of our defense. There's no China China War. 1, they want peaceful reunification. War destroys their economy, and there's no fixed timeline, which proves that there's no break or threshold for when they get impact uniqueness. 2, the military isn't ready. Xi is purging hundreds of military officers, which signals distrust and military loyalty. Our AB is citing the most recent U.S. intel assessments, and it's from this month. Their cards are all theoretical, and terminal impact is outdated. Now, the internal link is 0. They did not answer the warrant that the basis for alliances is Western capitalist ideology, not the strength of the administrative state or relationships with certain politicians. NATO and alliances have weathered a litany of disagreements over policy and treatment over others. The idea that CBRs are the critical internal link to relationship between two countries is entirely false, which proves it's either resilient or terminally screwed, which is shaky evidence. Even if they did have CBRs during that time, it does not necessarily prove that the sole reason why those alliances were strong is because the administrative state was strong, and there's no internal link. Now, Proliv is wrong. They've dropped a litany of warrants. There's domestic opposition and institutional constraints that prevent countries from ever wanting to necessarily build the bomb. And they also dropped the other warrant that sanctions check, which means even if an ally got the bomb, we would destroy their economy into oblivion, and they would never use it. Now, the bureaucracy advantage. 1ER dropped that the SQUO solves. They can defy illegal orders and challenge firings in the status quo via the OSC and MSPB. Workers trust those processes because they routinely engage them, and they just said Congress was key to certainty, and those whistleblower protections are sufficient to solve. The 1ER doesn't say a goddamn word on them, so the 2ER gets 0. The EPA does the waivers, so this is only a NEG arc, because they can do waivers in the SQUO, but the E15 is about a regulation on the private sector about how much corn they need to put in their gas, so the EPA doesn't need to enforce anything, so it's end of story. Last thing, no polycrisis impact. The 2EC's warrants don't match with the 1ER, so you should strike them off your flow. 1, there are global intervening actors and political will for solutions in the SQUO. James says their interwoven problems are not a novel risk, and we've been subject to polycrisis for centuries. Innovation and willingness to cooperate ensures there's sufficient momentum to resolve spirals. Smith says there are tons of intangible mechanisms that check shocks, like when supply falls, demand cushions, impact on prices, and there's a slew of solutions that are effective in preventing spillover.
Advantage 1, bureaucracy. Advantage 2, signaling. Advantage 1, bureaucracy. Advantage 2, signaling. The counter plan, the dissent. We all good? Bureaucratic collapse is imminent and will end all life on the planet. We access the environmental impacts of the one in our said outweighs the amount magnitude of competent civil services necessary to implement policy solutions to the imminent cascading and entangled crisis. This causes extinction from the convergence of climate shocks, pandemics, nuclear meltdowns, and cyber attacks. That's what I see ahead. And no, it is try or die for the AFF. The status quo is certainly existential. We are winning this. Winning this claim means the dissent can only be defense because if the EPA is totally hollowed out now and incompetent, they can never properly enforce any E15 requirements, which should be more on the dissent. So we do not need to win a broader polycrisis impact because we are winning. The plan saves all U.S. ethanol, which is the impact that they have introduced and said is existential. That's the case. Will always be prior to the dissent. It also outweighs on magnitude. The convergence of all risks simultaneously far outweighs the loss of corn profits in the U.S. There are more ways that we could die in the status quo in the world of the plan than just by losing a couple of stalks of corn. Jesus Christ, dropped that you must categorically air off. The bureaucracy is a thankless job. They've likely prevented dozens of extinction level threats in the past century, but we have never heard about them because agencies nipped them in the bud, and Trump has taken a machete to the federal workforce in an unprecedented manner. Their card differential will be decisive. None of their cards assume Trump in 2026. Kaufman says half of the workforce is gone in the status quo. In the Guterman evidence from the 1AC, it says that there's been mass agency closures and forced resignation. Thirdly, our 1AC Simpson evidence says Trump is firing anyone who chooses to speak out and replacing them with total incompetent idiots. The 1AR did not drop that the status quo solves. We said there might be worker protections on the books, but they cannot be enforced without unions who have the resources to launch sophisticated legal battles. As per the two pieces of handler evidence in the 1AC, the next handler card in the 1AC also says that rights only matter when resources exist. So one worker suing Trump cannot do anything independently. They've dropped only CBRs, make the workforce an attractive environment for qualified workers and access the skills of merit and expertise which are necessary to solve both advantages. We cannot rely on global intervening actors. Most of our impacts are collective action problems. Other countries have no incentives to follow through on their commitments, and the U.S. cannot follow through on their own. All of this defense equally takes out the E15 decide. If the free market naturally balances supply and demand, we do not need EPA regulations to save corn. The fact that they are going for private sector is self-correcting, and a decide about how we need regulations mean that you should either strike defense and put the case at 100 or zero their decide because they extended defense to themselves. All of their defense is pre-Trump. It assumes a competent bureaucracy that can naturally self-correct, which is only solvency for us. Now, the signaling advantage, concede impact defense not going for it, but it takes out their food wars impact. There's zero scenario for conflict. Russia and China want to avoid war. Alliances are strong in the status quo, and they said themselves that Western growth is important and determinant for stability, that more so than food prices, which takes out their decide. Their exemption, solvency, takeout stuff was only contextualized to this advantage. So there's not a decision on exemptions, takeout, advantage one that doesn't intervene an absurd amount. Now the conditions counter plan proper. The 2NR stuff is brand new on the turn, so you should strike all of it. 1. Unions cannot change the policies of their government. Congress passes regulation that gets enforced by the agencies. Agencies alone don't have the statutory authority, which is the thesis of their own dissad. The one to see tumultuous evidence says unions can bargain over A, number of employees, B, job protections, and C, things like paid family leave, but not that Trump will make sure no regulations happen ever. The impact to this is China war, which the 2NR extended defense to that we conceded, so there's no terminal to the straight turn, and I don't even think it should be in their dock. Exemptions do not matter. We've already had them. Durable fiat. It guarantees good faith implementation of the plan, and we can solve a vast majority of the case by making the workforce more attractive, so the bill cannot be watered down. Now, the E15 decide. Okay, I'm moving the link stuff to the top because it genuinely zeroes all offense they could possibly go for. This argument is silly as hell, but MSU, it was even sillier for double blowing it off. A 1% risk of case outweighs its app on a presumed thought that the bureaucracy needs CBRs because the plan has already passed the House, so it does not need the House to vote for it. The 2AC said, quote, the plan has already passed the House, so they don't need a vote on it. The 1AR followed up and said that means no backlash and read a card to substantiate this argument and said, quote, no link, the plan already passed the House. It means that normal means it's just the Senate and the President. This is entirely mishandled by both the 1R and by the 2R. The defense, it does not matter if the House Freedom Caucus gets mad at the Senate because their anger is directed towards the Senate, not towards Johnson. We've empirically disproven the claim that the HFC gets pissed off at the plan because they've already voted for the plan, and they should have had the time to already backlash in the past 5 months since the Paula Act was passed. Deciding on this might make you feel slightly icky, but you have a moral imperative to punish MSU for blowing off the no-link argument against the only AF on the topic that beats the House politics aside. The new 2R answer to this was, quote, HFC reaction to the plan never answered, reverse causal. That's new, should be struck because the 1AR instructed you to only let them negate the fact that the bill is passed. But I get the last word. There's no rational HFC member, if those even exist, that would backlash in their House voting for a bill that has already passed the House and being passed in the Senate and signed by the President. If this backlash happens, then the HFC already blew off their steam by backlashing the old House legislation whenever the Paula Act passed the House like 5 months ago. Now, the link cannot turn case. Holy shit, they said I get 3 words. Are you ready for them? Not private sector. That's what their fine and Shepherd evidence is about. So obviously that does not apply. It says it needs concessions to employers. Those employers cannot be conceded because they are the government, which the 1AR said. Now, the internal links to the disside. MSU may have cards saying E15 is better than the status quo, but not that the entire ethanol industry will collapse without it. First, the EPA totally solves the disside. Their waiver program is great. This has happened for decades, and we are just extending their cards to say current waivers are enough. All of their evidence is asserting that ethanol sales must be year-long are from big corn lobbyists who you should categorically reject. Conversely, the 1AC itself is a product of all of our EPA evidence because they're public service minded. The waivers program is great. EPA issues every June and extends sales into the summer whenever there's energy or food risk. They may only last for 2 weeks, but we have great evidence that the industry understands these rules, invests accordingly, and that the waivers are extended deep into the summer. The 1AR Bowski evidence says once again that the EPA issues a waiver program to allow supplier sales this year, and that the EPA is suspending all federal and state regulations limiting the sales. So the decide is at best a year and a half from now, and the destruction to the federal bureaucracy happens before that. Even without the RFS industry, E15 will always be around because the demand will always be there globally. Every country wants our corn oil. Maybe production is slightly outpaces demand, but that will not collapse anything. Long-term ethanol is entirely irrelevant because our evidence says ethanol industry prices in EPA waivers in the status quo. Listen, we've had the waiver program for 60 years and we've not died. Good debate.
NEG card out.
PISA, and that there's some risk that HFC members water down the AFF legislative process. The dissad proper, I think the NEG is definitely ahead on the question of uniqueness. The 1AR and 2AR never really answer this kind of profit crisis distinction, and that profit is the thing that drives things like investment in innovation, which the NEG has identified as kind of the key thing to ensure lasting food security. The link was where I sat with for by far the most, because I think it's where the 2AR really kind of sits down on. I am concerned about this past the House thing, but I think the 1MC evidence is good enough that it gets them out of it a little bit more for me than I think the other judges probably did, because I think there's kind of a bit of a distinction being made between just like HFC outright backlashes and more the NEG argument of like the HFC is more willing to be more lax with bills that they pass because they can point to like huge cuts in the federal workforce. I do have a different concern that is never really raised by the AFF of like the NEG evidence seems to suggest the HFC would be less willing to vote on like spending stuff. I'm not sure if like E15 would be like a significant amount of federal spending, but I don't think that's like an objection raised by the AFF. Link Alone's turns case, I was kind of a little bit unclear on both sides about this, but I think while the AFF's assessment is right that the evidence itself is about like concession to private sector employers, I do still think that this is kind of spun by the NEG, like fines and penalties still kind of get pushed down in instances in which the federal government would violate employment rights or collective bargaining rights. EPA solves, I think it probably at most makes like the time frame of the impact a little bit later, but I think the NEG has read some pretty decent evidence about farmers needing to have confidence to be able to invest significantly in innovation. And then last, the like signal impact kind of cross applications, it probably means it doesn't get to Russia, because I think a lot of the NEG evidence is about like Russia structurally like can't do that much conflict. It probably does still get to China, given a lot of the evidence read is about just like China not wanting to like invade Taiwan, which I don't think the Sikorsky evidence is talking about. And then the case polyprices impact defense, I'm also sort of left a little bit unclear on this by the end of the debate, because I think there's not much explanation really on like either side as to exactly what the like specific scenarios in the polycrisis or polysolutions looks like, or what like the kind of collective action problems are that would or wouldn't be resolved. Maybe this is kind of just like an inherent problem with this sort of big impact without specific scenarios thing, but that kind of like makes me lean a little bit more NEG by default if I don't have sort of a specific scenario to hang my hat on. The last thing I think is like the 1AR is pretty light on this skilled worker protections argument, even though I think the 2AR is probably right that things like union resources are needed to have like worker confidence. I think given the like lack of time the 1AR is spending on it, it does still like limit the case down a bit for me in combination with the polycrisis.
I'm good, next. Agree with Joey. Really super good debate. Super entertaining. Really loved it. I voted F. I think the case is big and outweighs the DA. I did vote on this just like no link thing on the DA. I think the F basically wins just like no risk of the dissent, because the F's argument, as they explain it, is that normal means of the plan is that because the bill has already passed the House, that means that the F could be implemented by just like only passing the Senate and having the president sign the bill, which means that it wouldn't implicate Republican unity in the House at all. The only real response to this is just that like restating that the HFCs were not the ones in the House who voted for the plan, which is obviously true. But I just don't think it matters if the F wins that implementation can happen without the House, meaning that there's no reason that the HFC would backlash to House leadership or just like defect over E15s, because the people that they would be mad at would be the Senate and the President and not the House. I think the 2NR just needs a lot more time on this point. I like agree that 1NC has very specific link evidence, and I think maybe there's a world in which I could reconstruct a link argument based on just like what the 1NC link evidence and all the link evidence in the debate says. But the 2NR just sort of blows this off, and I think given that that's true, I just like, you know, it would be too interventionist for me to conclude that there's still some residual link to the DA. So I basically concluded zero risk of the DA, and yeah. A couple of other outs. I thought about this AI double turn. Ultimately, I've decided to not vote on it just because I think that the impact is a lot smaller than the case. I think even if the 2NR is correct about this turn, the 2NR just doesn't really do impact comparison about like why AI leadership matters or why Chinese AI leadership is bad. So I think that case just outraised because polycrisis is big and existential. I kind of think this is a bit of a missed opportunity because I think that if you're right about this double turn, and it's true that just like AI leadership is existential, there just needs to be a lot more time there. And I could definitely be persuaded that that like outweighs the case because this 1NC impact card that you read is like pretty good. It talks a lot about a lot of stuff that is not just like US-China war. But the 2NR is just not doing that. So I think that, again, would be too interventionist for me to conclude that that somehow outweighs polycrisis when the 2AR is doing a lot of just like really good impact comparison about why the polycrisis is the largest impact in the debate. Last thing I thought about was Link Turn's case. I agree that the card's about the private sector, so I don't think it's super relevant. I think the 2NR explanation just needs to be a little bit more bigger for me to think that this is like a persuasive argument. Just like, quote, it waters down the AFF doesn't really make sense when you're not explaining like how the AFF would be watered down and, you know, how unions would be weakened in a way that implicates their ability to just like make the administrative state better and just solve the polycrisis of threats. And you know, the AFF extends solvency and durable fiat, so I didn't really think about that. Case is high enough. I think that even without this link thing, I sort of felt like that the 2NR just lets case just get like pretty big, at least on the polycrisis advantage. I thought you were doing totally fine on the other advantage, but obviously that just like allows this 2AR pivot to happen. So I sort of felt like case was bigger than the DA even without this link thing, but obviously didn't spend a ton of time thinking about that because I just thought case was bigger.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with basically any of that. I think that I maybe started where Gabriel ended, and that I thought the case was just really, really big. And I agree that the 2NR spends a lot of time on the signaling advantage, but the problem is that there's just not a ton of like just clear, explicit, well-warranted, and well-explained polycrisis defense in the 2NR. A lot of it is sort of like quick jabs at the concept of the polycrisis, but it's not a really well-explained defensive argument that I could tell Kansas, like, hey, I did not think that the polycrisis was big and existential for these reasons that are identified by the 2NR. So the reasons that I kind of have are like, there's intervening actors, there's like a global willingness to cooperate, there are intangible mechanisms that exist that can like cushion things. But what I'm saying is kind of the extent of the analysis that's being done by the 2NR. And I think that the 2AR does a really, really good job of explaining the polycrisis impact and saying, you know, like, it's not any one specific scenario, but the convergence of all the present risks that exist and are identified by our card outweighs on magnitude compared to the impact of the DA. And I do not think that the 2NR had great internal link defense. I think one thing that sort of bogs you down is that when you get to the case, there's like, particularly on the bureaucracy advantage, there's like a decent amount of time that you spend trying to bolster the DA as opposed to just doing actual defense to the advantage. So there's a bunch of stuff about like waivers and the EPA, and all this other stuff about the DA that I don't think is super relevant. Similarly, I don't think that the 2NR did a good enough job of extending this piece of evidence about like why the status quo solves and why there's some protections in place. And I actually disagree. I thought that the 1AR and 2AR both did a pretty good job of answering this stuff and saying like we have more recent evidence from 26 that says that everything is in chaos and it's all a bunch of madness and like the plan's the only thing that intervenes to get us back on track. With respect to the DA, agreed with Gabriel that I really didn't think there was a link. I just, the plan being the Senate and the president, I thought was just like dispositive for the risk of the link. AI thing, I think I was maybe less on it than Gabriel. I was not like fully willing to just say like resolving bureaucratic turbulence necessarily means that the plan results in a ton of overwrought AI regulations that doom us in the AI race. And I tried to give you the benefit of the doubt by looking through a lot of the 1AC evidence to see what you kind of were relying on to tell this story for the 2NR.
just to see like if there was something there that I think I could like tell Kansas like, hey, here was the internal link to this that I thought was conclusive and definitive enough, particularly to outweigh how big the case was. And I did really think that I could get there. But I do agree also that there was not enough impact calc in the 2NR for it to possibly outweigh the case. So the biggest thing for me was I thought that the case was really, really big, and I thought that this link thing was a huge problem. Two things I'll just quickly add to that. One is that I think the 2NR, I know that this goes out of order, I think the 2NR should just start with this link thing. To me, it's like by far the most threatening thing in the 1AR. I know it's like at the bottom. I think you need to just move it to the top and just be like, and also just based on like their card doc and their, like, I would just say like, look, this is the thing that I think is most threatening. Your cards are pretty good everywhere else. I think this is the thing that you need to spend the most time on. I'm perfectly fine with you just being like, I'm gonna answer this first just to take care of it. And then the second thing I wanted to add is I thought that the 2AR was phenomenal. I thought that the 2AR was unbelievable. I thought that there were like the impact calc at the top was exactly what was needed, and I thought that there was so many good moments of like just like doing 2AR stuff to like connect with the judges. When you were like, they said we only get 3 words here, the 3 words, not private sector. I was like, that is a great moment, and I feel like I don't see that enough. So that was a really fantastic 2AR.
So I'm a little confused about like why case is big. So like I'm kind of recalling, especially like Zahir, I'm recalling a debate at like Wake where you were like, if you extend defense, like extend the card and like let your card do your work for you, like extend the warrants to the card, and then like expect the judge to sort of like do it for, like fill in based on that. And so I would say that was sort of my rationale and reasoning for like the way I extended the warrants, because like we read 2 cards on it, they only have 1 card. I felt like the prices example was like what I thought was a warrant. I guess like what would you change about the way that 2NR explained polycrisis defense that would make you not think that the case is big?
So I understand what you're saying. The biggest problem for me is that one, I don't think your cards are that good. And then the second thing is I think that the 2NR is not comparative. So it is one thing to say, here's what our warrants are for why there is no polycrisis, but letting the cards do the talking for you can only get you so far. So I think that you need to say like, look, our evidence says this, their evidence doesn't assume that, and do some of that comparative stuff in the 2NR. And you know, after like a season's worth of like polycrisis debates, I think it's fair to say that you should expect the 2AR with this AFF to stand up and be like, here's our 3-minute soliloquy on the polycrisis. And I think that needs more work and more explanation in the 2NR in order to beat back the risk of it. That's particularly true because I don't think that the 2NR spends a lot of time doing internal link defense. Like I said, like I thought that the app was far ahead on like the uniqueness stuff for the advantage, where the 2NR does spend an exceedingly brief amount of time. And so given that I think that the app is so far ahead on that part of the advantage, it is difficult for me to say that I reduced the risk of the case because of your cards being so good on no polycrisis. I thought that the app's warrants and the app's evidence and the app's debating on yes polycrisis, yes existential was better. And I think also, and I think I somewhat remember the debate that you're referring to. I think that the difference with that is that maybe I'm not remembering 100% correctly, but I think what I said in that debate also is that the app's cards were kind of bad. And so there was less of like the need for the stuff that I'm describing here is when your cards are better, it's easier for you to let the cards do the talking, but their cards were better here. And I think you need to make that assessment when setting up the 2NR on the case.
Okay, I guess like, sure. Counterplay? We think it was the right 2NR?
I didn't think it was competitive.
I can't say that I thought about it enough to like have a strong thought. Like I was kind of just going through the motions and writing stuff down, but yeah, I don't know. I really liked, this is not really a response to your question, but I really liked the 2NR move on the AI thing. I thought that was really clever. I just didn't think that there was like enough to put it together. But I will say that I didn't have like the instinctual response that Gabriel just gave of like saying it was not competitive.
Wait, sorry, Gabe, can you say like at least another another sentence or two, if not like all of Emery's thoughts.
Maybe this is just me, but I agreed with the top of the 1 ER that just like, because the counter plan like produces a world where just like federal workers would certainly have bargaining rights post plan, that I think that it's just like extra specification. So for me, the counter plan is fun.
So it's like for the ones that opt to keep the rights,
Yeah,
those
like
rights are certain.
The counter plan still gives workers mandatory bargaining rights. It just like after, once they jump through that hoop, then they just get mandatory like certain bargaining rights.
Do you think it would be better for you? Obviously, this changes like a lot of other moving pieces, but do you think you would be more persuasive by explaining it as just like a pick out of some federal workers, and they get to? It's like it's not the FDA pick; it's like the workers who agree to give up their money pick, and so it's like it almost
I
like
think that if that's true, that's definitely like a reason that it would be competitive. But I think that sneaky plan text writing, say vast majority, probably.
Sure. Well, that's why we didn't
But yeah.
make that pivot in this week. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Joey, thoughts on what's going on there?
Largely agree. Like my kind of first instinct is it's probably not competitive given sort of like still certain for everybody who agrees. Yeah, don't really have a lot else to add other than what's already been said.
Steve, can I ask you? Okay. What is the best reason for why the disad could turn advantage 1? Other than like we access a trigger of the polycrisis, you said if any one starts happening, then the whole thing starts happening. That's kind of how polycrisis works. So if we trigger one, we trigger them all. That's pretty dumb.
I don't know.
No, you can say like I don't know. Is it super plausible to say like food is a catalyst for the polycrisis?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Right,
but it
like,
seemed like the
that
room
seems-
was not rocking with that.
I seems well. I don't know if I wasn't rocking with that. I wasn't rocking with the link.
Yeah, sorry. I just said that and Gabe was like, eh.
I'm rocking with it. Like
Okay.
I think it's fair to say like food is important. Food is super important for every decision that we make, and if we don't have it, there's no like institutional capacity to respond to any threat. There's no institutional resilience to respond to any threat. And not only that, but the DA accesses both war and environment impacts, and the combination of the two overwhelms institutional structures designed to constrain the polycrisis. Even bureaucrats get hungry.
I guess my reaction was just like,
That's pretty good.
I don't really think you need to win that the dissat turns the case, turns polycrisis in order to win this debate. It's just like your path to victory is just like DA fast, big nuclear war, and then just like a bunch of case defense. So honestly, I think that your time is better spent just like extending polycrisis defense and extending like case defense than explaining how food wars turn polycrisis than doing our.
Okay. That makes sense. The last thing I had was separate from the way that it was explained in this debate. The way that we desire to explain this link is sort of where like Joey landed, where it's like not so much that like the like plan goes to the floor of the House and they like have a big fight about it, but it's like there's a set of money that was freed up because we fired a bunch of workers, plan brings it back, now there's no more dollars, that pisses these guys off. If explained as such, do we still feel that this link is small and harmed by the fact that the House did the plan? Or is it, like, if properly explained, there is dissent? And is it like, this is dumb and they got you on it being dumb? Or like...
That's why I sort of referenced that like I didn't want to like reconstruct the link argument, because I agree that that link like makes sense.
Okay.
Especially also just like if Trump passed this plan, like signed this bill, like that would obviously blow up the House GOP too, even if it doesn't require a vote in the House. Just because they're so like closely tied to Trump, and they would be like pissed at him like betraying the #1 priority. So I think this link argument is totally beatable. Just obviously requires.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I agree.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we weren't like in front of you two just being like, yeah, never do this again.
No, 100%.
Okay, sweet. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, I think I have like two main questions. So this AI thing, the 2AR to answer it better should just be like bigger on like explaining what our reg stuff, like what our head and nomic evidence say we do about the polycrisis to substantiate no link.
Yeah.
Okay. should that get started earlier in the 1AR? Or I guess they can't possibly.
Did you like interpret this happening in the 2 and C, or was it just like the 2 and R in the first
I
one?
didn't interpret it.
No,
I
I
was
don't
with
think
you
it
that
was
this was pretty new.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought it was smart, but like I did think it was pretty new. So
Yeah.
I think the jury was kind of fine.
Yeah, I was totally fine with the 2 hour making answers. I just thought that you were like a little bit too blasé with what your answers were.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I'm a little bit worried, like, if you win that unions, like, just don't affect the issuing of regulations at all, like, that seems pretty bad for the AF. It's like, surely you must win that, like, you make the regulations enforce better, maybe there are more regulations, maybe they're better. So, I don't know, it's like,
Yeah.
I think that the way I would approach this is just cross-application of China defense like you did, and then you also have AI defense. I just would have extended your AI defense being like, polycrisis obviously outweighs. You have cards that say that AGI doesn't matter, so.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Other question I had was, how are we feeling about vast majority? Like, did anyone think the solvency deficit to that ever got particularly
I
big?
mean, it didn't get really flushed out. I would say that Cross-X was slightly for them, but only when you
Yeah, we were a bit
only when you
facetious.
saw through the pizza analogy. That's when I was like, okay, I'm kind of with the neg a little bit. I don't know. It didn't get flushed out. I can see a world where it's a problem, but it was not in this debate.
I thought it was fine for you guys.
I thought with how it was explained, probably like hurt the signaling advantage a decent bit, but probably like fine on bureaucracy.
Okay, cool. I think that's all I had.
Argument that if we win case uniqueness, it means the EPA can't do their job, therefore no E15. Does that matter?
Not a ton without more